And we're back.
Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Parham.
This is the last No Direction of the year. It's something that we labeled as an end-of-year special. I think I kind of mislabeled it, though, because in the write-up I was like, we're going to be reviewing 2018, and it was a significant year, so we're definitely going to be looking back on 2018.
Right.
But it's kind of like, as I was writing the review, there was like 4 chunks of timeline. There was business as usual, January and February.
It was not quite business as usual. It was not business as usual in January and February.
It was not business as usual?
No.
All right, let's start there. How was January and February not business as usual?
January and February was No Direction Beyond finding its roots, and until a certain events, until it all changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Starfinder had overtaken No Direction Prime as our top performing show on the network.
All right. I was thinking of it from a Pathfinder point of view, but from a network point of view, that is significant. So I don't want to take that away from No Direction Beyond. That is something that's definitely worth talking about. We will, I don't have it on my list, but we could talk about the ICV2 listings as the year goes on. So in January, I believe you are consistent with our ratings. Starfinder was outselling Pathfinder.
Right.
Is more or less true from when Starfinder launched the entire way through. I say more or less because I haven't referenced it, but I know for a fact that Starfinder was definitely outselling Pathfinder for a significant chunk of its life before the March announcement we're about to talk about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it was fun times. It was exciting. We had all this cool new stuff to talk about. Everything was fresh. All the books were fairly well done. We were having there was a whole lot to be excited about as I was going to say Starfinder fan, but I meant asterisk as a star, not Starfinder as a star. So if you was a blank Finder fan, there was a lot of stuff coming out that was exciting.
Oh.
And then of course things changed in March.
In March, it was announced that we were getting Pathfinder 2nd edition.
Right.
And it was announced the right way. It came with a new website. It came with a launch of here's a whole bunch of actual play content with our podcast partner, the Glass Cannon. We sat down with them. We recorded a whole bunch of this stuff. Here's content related to 2nd edition. Here's the website. Here's answers. They Eric, Mona, and Logan both appeared on No Direction. We had a special episode that we scrambled to put together. They were more than happy to join us. They got the word out right away. They got people enthusiastic. Everything about the 2nd edition launch hit the ground running. It was probably the smoothest new edition announcement I have ever seen.
Right. Yeah, and that episode still continues to hit our top post charts month after month because people keep going back to it.
I'm not surprised. It is content dense. They were answering all questions. It was Logan, who we don't have on often, so he got to talk about things that we don't usually talk about. And it was Eric, who we had just had on the week before, not even 2 weeks before. And that's fine because Eric is super candid and he is someone that knows what he can and can get away with saying.
Right.
And he will even give us things that he knows he probably shouldn't be saying, but it's who's going to get him in trouble?
Right. It helps to be one of the bosses.
So that enthusiasm pretty much carried all the way through to August. So at PaizoCon was very 2nd edition focused. There was a lot of events and there was the open playtest run by all the Paizo staff, giving people a sample of 2nd edition. The banquet was very 2nd edition heavy. The blog was regularly churning out new content about 2nd edition, or at least about the playtest.
Right.
It needs to be very clear that 2nd edition was never written in stone, but the information we were getting there was about the playtest, which was more or less ready to print as soon as it was announced. And any of the content we were previewing was the playtest, which we were warned right from the beginning was going to be a more extreme version of what could be 2nd edition. There was basically no way 2nd edition was going to be this playtest because they were trying to stress test several things. But we did know the strategy. We knew it was going to release. The rulebook was going to be released in both hardcover, softcover. Oh, no, I said both, but also there was the special edition, and that everyone was going to be able to get it for free online as a PDF. Same thing for an adventure, Doomsday Dawn. There was going to be a map pack that was going to be exclusive to this playtest. You would never get it again, and it was going to be the maps that were relevant to Doomsday Dawn. And were there any? Oh, there was Pathfinder Society adventures that were for the playtest.
Yeah, and those are good. I love those. They were super fun.
I never got a chance to play them.
Oh,
I
we
mean,
need to
they're still
fix
out there.
that. We need to fix that.
My Pathfinder playing has been at an all-time low this year.
Oh, no.
Mostly just not for like want of another edition or anything like that. It was just for want of a little more free time. I did leave my regular gaming group. When did we? It was before Plastic. Actually, it might have been right around January. Which let's save that for a little bit later. We'll have a whole category of just talking about our Pathfinder experiences this year. So we were talking about up to August at this point. Gen Con was the release of second edition. We got to participate in a really cool game that we'll talk about when we talk about our con experiences. It was shortly after August that enthusiasm from the launch really started to get fractured. And the camp of people that were going to wait and see started to get a little nervous. The camp of people that were not really interested in a new edition were still interested in first edition. It got larger, and it just felt like the playtest really, it didn't just stress test the game, it stress test the community, it stress test interest in second edition, which when it launched and how smoothly it launched, I never would have guessed that the playtest would have been that polarizing.
I always predicted that this was going to be a bumpy ride whenever this thing got announced, because just the unique nature of this community and how it formed, there was always going to be some amount of friction. Though the amount of it I was surprised of, but how the momentum shift I got surprised about. But I could not see a path forward for making a second edition of Pathfinder that was a seamless transition.
True, I could, but I think it's fair to say that between the two of us, I'm a little more optimistic, you're a little more pessimistic.
Yeah, but we're about to switch those roles.
No, I'm just saying in general.
Oh yeah, in general. Yeah, I'm always looking to prepare for the stress points, and you are more happy about things.
I dive into things enthusiastically, and I tend to see the bright side of things without having to look for it.
And that's why that's your card.
Yes, I'm the enthusiast. Darren Caldemeyer in chat says something that is definitely worth talking about. He says that he felt that the playtest was too much, too soon, in such a short span of time. So that was definitely it. Not only were the community being asked to digest this new set of rules, which ended up having a lot more things that people weren't, well, at least from our review, and I'd seen this echoed multiple places online, but this is all anecdotal. There was more about the playtest that I didn't like than I expected, especially after the previews. And a lot of that stuff I felt was not previewed. So either it was deliberately held back because it was something that they were worried people were not going to like, or it was not previewed because it was not seen as something that would be that polarizing. And by not previewing it, we were kind of blindsided by a lot of stuff that was just really alienating to people that were more used to the first edition way of doing things. So we had to dive into this new system, and then there was this incredible grinding rate of having to playtest a new part in 2 weeks for, what was it, 3 months? 3 consecutive months? Maybe even 4?
It was August. It was mid-August through early January, or actually really early December.
Because there were 7 parts. Each part got 2 weeks. And also I think people were underestimating how long each part would take.
Oh yeah, I totally did. I thought we were dealing with, each part's going to be about a Pathfinder Society scenario length, and that's doable. 7 Society scenarios. I play one of those every other week anyway, and then we start doing them, and they're like 8 hours a piece. Some of them.
Yes, it tested our patience and enthusiasm for Pathfinder, and I know we aren't the peak of how enthusiastic you can be for Pathfinder, but we're pretty up there. So when we started faltering, I was starting to get very nervous for Pathfinder's future. And at this point, a lot of the communication got more aggressive in how often it was coming out, not in necessarily the tone of some of the posts, but it was also it wasn't encouraging. It was like, we understand that some people are getting stressed. We really need to work out the kinks of the system. That's why we've done such an aggressive thing. And people were expecting this to be more fun.
Yeah.
And it came off a little bit more like work. And there was definitely parts of the playtest that were not even designed with a lot of fun in mind. They were designed with the system in mind.
Right. I would be really curious to see how many groups playtested part 1 compared to how many groups playtested part 7. Because in any situation that would have been a drop-off, but I imagine this looks like a cliff.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would also like to compare it to how many people get through part 1 of an adventure path versus part 2, just because, you know, one's foot in the water. Anyone can put their foot in the water, but by the time you've got your knee deep, that's when you're feeling the temperature.
Yeah.
So one of the problems with, all right, I'm going to stick to our problems. One of the problems with how the playtest was presented was that it had to be done consistently and therefore blindly the whole time. We were not privy to information. We were privy to summaries of the information that Paizo was seeing. But as soon, like, if at any point they were like, here's the data we've collected, here's what we're doing with it, it would have spoiled the entire thing. So they had to weigh the value of an unbiased, basically looking for a word, the sanctity of the playtest. That's not the word I was looking for, but it kind of sums up what I'm talking about. The integrity. There we go. They had to weigh the integrity of the playtest versus the attitude of the community. And I think it kind of like reached a boiling point where people were still really trying to get through books 4 and 5, or parts 4 and 5. And around then, it felt like the community was just like, all right, we're done. We're going to see what the playtest, what leads to, what the second edition is like, but like it's asking us to do more than we are willing to do.
Right. I mean, I don't think the community was, well, at large, was ready for the amount of stress in this stress test. To put it rather bluntly, this definitely, like, I can see the methodology they chose. I mean, this was designed to really push a lot of experimental ideas to their limits and breaking points. People usually get paid to do that. Being a video game beta test or internal quality assurance crew is not a fun game. It's a lot of jumping in the corner on purpose to see if your sprite glitches through it. A lot of repeating actions, and you could see some of that DNA. You could see that they knew, okay, this is where we're going to fill the entire field with difficult terrain and have tripping hyenas that can just ignore it, and we're going to stress test difficult terrain. And yeah, totally stressed it. And you could, in like, then you see playtest reports from part 7 where it's like pretty much almost every group, well, I don't know about almost every group, but every group I see reporting it was like, yeah, we played this 2 or 3 times. It's a TPK every time. Yeah. And also, about halfway through, they start introducing the changes, but you couldn't retroactively change the entire bestiary or rewrite Doomsday Dawn, though they did do some rewrites of parts of it to stress the changes. But I mean, you were stress testing a system that was evolving every week, and to the point to where there's a great community members have been putting together versions of the PDF that have like used the comment features that are available in Adobe to just like put in the errata straight in the PDF so you can flip through it. By the end of the playtest, almost every single line is just struck through, and it's just like covered in sticky notes.
Now, you mentioned that our optimism and pessimism, our typical roles, have reversed at this point.
Yeah.
So what are your feelings at this point about the potential for second edition?
Well, I thought that, well, just to clarify, I just thought that the things that I disliked about the game were very different from the things that you were expressing you disliked about the game, though we had some pretty significant crossover. And I'm just really hopeful that, well, I am trying to put my trust in the design skills of the Pathfinder design team to take this feedback and do good and take it and make the best game they can out of it, and hope that the community has given them good feedback, because about halfway through, I started to see a change in the messaging that was like, oh, okay, they really are getting it now. Like some of those very first communications where they were hedging their communication, it was just like really worrying. It's like, are they getting this feedback? There's some stuff that it seems everybody doesn't like, and it's called Resonance. And I mean, ultimately, Resonance was sort of like the whipping boy of the playtest. It changed so often, so quickly. And even in the final blog post, they're like, yeah, it's pretty clear y'all don't like this thing as we presented it. And we still don't know what the final is going to look like for that thing. But that's an example of a system that was more stress than test.
I liked how Stephen referred to it when he was on the podcast. He said it was more stick than carrot.
Right. And that's how it felt like. I mean, we said so on the podcast during the review. It's like there were some parts of the system that felt like it was punishing players for the way they played First Edition more than it was evolving the system. And Resonance definitely felt like one of them. I mean, I'm getting hints that it was never intended for the Bag of Holding to be the ridiculous thing it turned out to be at the end, because it was just a system of somebody writing something over here, somebody writing something else over here, and then when we put them together, oh, that doesn't work. Evidently there was a lot of that, like like they very publicly said that they changed some, we don't know what it was, but they changed something in the core book real last minute that meant that all the monster math was now no longer valid. All the monsters were overtuned because all our characters were missing a bonus that we were all supposed to have the whole time that when the monsters were written, and we no longer had it. So all the monsters in all the playtest material were superhumans. Or super monsters. Most of them weren't humans.
There was that weird change where one update was all about the skills, and they were like, oh yeah, no, we've done the skills wrong, here's a much easier version of the skills. And then when they updated Doomsday Dawn, updated DCs, most of the DCs got higher.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh yeah, it's because we also did the math wrong when calculating those, and they were too low. And it's like, but if people are complaining that DCs are too high, and the main thing they're playing is Doomsday Dawn, and the DCs just got higher, this update has effectively done nothing. It's made things worse. It's just made you realize another error.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I'm hopeful for. I mean, this thing is a lot of moving parts. They were very intentionally pushing the system to its breaking points, and while at the same time trying to use this as a promotional tool. And I think that's where I think the two things were fighting each other, is the version of this where we are breaking this thing, we're going to push it till it breaks, and this is not going to be a fun experience, and all this stuff is really experimental and out there, and we don't know how it's going to handle, and we're going to be rewriting it every week, is one side of the playtest. And then there's also the rah second edition, here we've got Glass Cannon doing stuff every week, and we're going to do stuff every week, and second edition is going to be awesome side, and it's over here. And those two are fundamentally opposed forces. And it was really hard to be, how do you get excited about something that we know is broken, not broken, but dented?
It's even fair to say it's broken, because they did say there were issues with the math.
Right. And it's like, we're trying to test and fix it, but we're also trying to envision this nebulous version of what it is. And this is something that happens, again, I'm going to reference video games because this is where I'm used to seeing this concept of early access, beta testing, alpha versions, etc. Every game looks like crap until 2 weeks before it's released in the video game world. It's why video game reviewers always try to stay neutral when they're talking about preview content until it launches, and then you see the big review bombs hit. And so, crap, I lost my thought there for a second. But when you it's really, but we all are projecting I don't know that we're all projecting, but it is very common for people to project their perfect version of how this will end up at the far end of this testing. And then every time a change hits that isn't going towards that direction, it hurts the hope a little bit, to where the ultra enthusiast fans of a product become its worst critics, during its preview content, and because it's not always good to see how the sausage is made.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about my personal arc this year and how the playtest related to it, and it's on that note because, like, I was unbelievably on board when the announcement came out. I love Pathfinder. I prefer it. I think of Pathfinder as a system before I think of it as a setting, and the fact that I was on board for a new system surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so the announcement made me prepared for second edition, made me ready to move on from first edition. And playtesting at PaizoCon, it was great. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I really felt like this is a good system, but it's faster, and there's a lot of good tweaks that have been made to the system. And then when I had to, like, when it wasn't someone holding my hand, somebody on the Paizo staff saying, let's play this game, once it was put into my hands, it's like, I cannot interact with the system at all. I am not enjoying it, but I'm ready to move on from first edition. Like, what is going, like, you've convinced me I don't want first edition, but you've lost me as someone who's ready for second edition. And I was starting to contemplate, like, I've heard 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons is good. Is that I go back to Dungeons & Dragons? Like where does this leave me?
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of things happened, both of which relate to Luis.
Mm-hmm.
Luis, we had him on last episode. We talked about some of the more recent Pathfinder first edition material, some of the last stuff that's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And reviewing or reading over these books for that interview made me fall back in love with first edition. Right. I was like, no, first edition, for its flaws and how I'd like it to be different, it's still great. God, there's so much cool about first edition. And then Luis's enthusiasm for second edition is the most encouraging vote of confidence for the new system.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we talked about in the last interview, like, Luis's design philosophy is what I want someone working at Paizo's design philosophy to be. It's not just in line with my design philosophy. It's in line with my consumer philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And so for him to be excited about second edition, for him to be saying that second edition, not just playtest, but what he's seen of second edition is quality stuff, that it is the Pathfinder we all want, that has me on board for second edition. So now I'm like, I'm at a place where anything that happens, I can be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Second edition doesn't work out, I can go back to first edition. If we'll talk about it a little bit more in questions, if somebody picks up the first edition Slack, all the more power to them. And if second edition does land and it's exactly what I want and it fixed the problems that I have with it, with the playtest, wonderful. Mm-hmm. I cannot lose anymore.
And the reason I'm more optimistic is I have, and you've seen my list. I have a list of things when the playtest launched. I was like, okay, these are things I think were the rough spots, and this is where I'm having my worries. And towards some of it at the very end, but towards the very end of that, I've gone back to that list, and like almost all of them, it's like, oh, they fixed that, and they fixed that, and they say they're going to fix this. Like, they can't rewrite the entire magic system during the playtest, and they've admitted, like, hey, we probably over-nerfed casters. We're going to get back to that. So they say they're going to fix that, and just go down the list, and there's like 1 or 2 points on my list that weren't talked about. So, and I've seen your list, and less of yours got ticked off than mine.
Yes. So I do want to point out one thing. You said they nerfed casters. They didn't. They nerfed casting. Casters were as good at fighting as fighters. So they nerfed everybody, and they just made casting the worst option, even for a caster.
Well, no, I can tell you from experience that being a caster is not as good as being a fighter in second edition playtest. Because you don't get those really cool fighter powers, or sorry, fighter feats. I see that wink.
Yeah, all right, you know what? I want to dive into that then. One of my major issues is how much this reminds me of 4th edition on many levels. One of which is that it's basically every class has their class feats. That basically feels like how powers were distributed in 4th edition, where every class had a very similar chassis, and the math was very similar. And the difference between casting a spell and swinging a sword was more flavorful. And I found that the difference between being a fighter and being a wizard in the playtest was a lot more based on flavor than it was based on this class works different. It feels different. It expresses itself differently. And a lot of that was because of how tight they made the math, which is something they're saying they're correcting. However, 4th edition came out broken in the same way that the playtest came out broken. And 4th edition players had to play with the hardcover book and printouts of the PDFs of the errata, because things like the skill challenge system, where it said, this is how you run an easy skill challenge, this is how you run a hard skill challenge. When people analyze the math, it's like, no, the hard skill challenge is easier to defeat than the easy skill challenge. And Wizards of the Coast is like, you are absolutely right. So here is how skill challenges actually work on this digital copy of things. And it was just like, you can never have just a print copy of the rules. You always had to have something to make the rules functional.
Right.
And that's what the playtest felt like. And my concern is that they came to that playtest not wanting those math problems. The math was developed in private. And then the playtest came out and it's like, oh, there's math issues. And now the math is being solved in private. And so it's like the same system, at least from our point of view, is being implemented to correct a problem that was created in that exact same scenario, that exact same environment. That is worrying to me.
I definitely agree that there was, I not totally agree, there was a lot of similarities to 4th edition in some of the decisions they made here, and led to a lot of the similar problems. Like, I like to remind our listeners from time to time that I was one of the people who got into 4th edition. I ultimately left that game because I preferred Pathfinder better, but I never hated 4th edition. I played, when I first started playing quote-unquote Pathfinder, I was playing Golarion using the 4th edition rules for a full year. And I am very intimately familiar with all the balance and play of 4th edition. I think I continued playing 4th edition games like up until, oh gosh, Ultimate Combat came out, to give you an idea how long. Probably longer than that. I quit GMing games then, but I still stayed in the 4th edition campaign that met every other week. Probably a good 3 or 4 years into Pathfinder. So I like and what Ryan is saying is truth. I bought the hardcover books, but they were really just look pretty on the shelf, because you would get a book the day it launched and it was already worthless. And I really hope that Paizo does not run into that problem going forward. They can't. It really is so defeating when you have this ridiculously beautiful book filled with art and it's just worthless because the errata is so extensive that you end up playing using their online software. Like, you didn't use, like, people who printed off the PDF, they were being hard on themselves, because 4th edition had this lovely software that kept all the rules completely up to date. It's like a souped up version of the PRD, and I forget what that software was called, but its character generator was amazing, and all the support tools were awesome. And
was it Insider?
Yeah, I think it may have been Insider. I forget, man. It's been so long. But all the rules were always there and always up to date. And it was a subscription fee that they just stopped charging the subscription price for it. So, you know, it wasn't even free for most of us for most of its lifetime. And you just used that software to play the game. You didn't even look at the books. You read the books for the flavor, then you put them on the shelf and you never touched them again. And I really don't want that to happen to Pathfinder. And I have faith in the quality of our friends over there that shouldn't become a problem, though some recent books some recent books have had more editing problems than others, but none of Paizo's books have ever gotten to the point that those 4th edition books were, because it was a pure nightmare. Like, every single power was broken, every single thing. Like, good lord, I bought a copy of Ultimate Arcana 2, or no, Advanced Arcana, so it was the Magic Book 2, and half the pages were upside down.
Wow. Okay.
It was like the entire first print run was like that. So it was like, this thing is just worthless. I mean, I got to send it back and give it back to my game store, and they got me a legit copy later. But I mean, just like the quality control on those print books, they were leaning they were leaning too hard in the fact that they could tweak the system after the fact. It felt like I was buying, like it is with this game industry now. You buy a game and you download a 50 gigabyte patch the first day because it's shipped broken.
Imperiosaur is in chat and talking up their experience with 4E, and they confirmed it's Arcane Power 2 was the book.
Arcane Power, yes. They named their books Power. Arcane Power 2, half the book was upside down. Also, the interior of the book was pointless.
At least Paizo's, the way they distribute, their distribution model is better and more, let's call it mistake-friendly than Wizards of the Coast was. Because Wizards of the Coast did have that digital tool, but Paizo has the PRD, or now it's the Archive of Nethys, is the officially licensed one. And so errata can be put up digitally. They sell PDFs. They can update the PDFs.
Right.
So even if the hardcover book becomes an issue, it's not as alienating as the 4th edition issues were.
Yeah,
it's still not great. Hopefully a 2nd edition comes out and the math has been solved. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
1st edition isn't perfect.
Right.
And we came to love some of their flaws, and we came to just have workarounds for other flaws. But the core system has to work.
I don't know how much of the behind the curtains we need to bring out to our fans here, but like when things were at their bleakest, their absolute bleakest, when like the communication hadn't started coming out here that they had started to change, and they were still trying to preserve the sanctity of the playtest material, and the information wasn't coming out that some of the more obvious problems were being addressed. Before things started to take a turn and everything was looking real bleak, it became a mantra in No Direction's private, it's part of the Discord, where us and the staff get to chat back and forth each other when we start to look at these problems, and we're like, well, Starfinder's great. That sort of became the little hope mantra we hang on to. It's like, well, Starfinder's still great. And I don't want to be too mean. Like, I'm still super hopeful that and that, especially towards the end when it started taking that turn, that they're going to, I'm still hopeful that they will produce a fantastic game that will win me over. And if not, 1st edition's awesome and Starfinder's still great.
And 1st edition's awesome enough that if 2nd edition is financially successful enough that they can give it some time and put out some backdoor errata, and put out some more books of options and open up some of the options, then I can play 1st edition until 2nd edition is closer to the game I wanted.
Yep. All right. Well, that
brings us to the end of the year, November, December, which is where we are at now, where it just felt like the playtest ended and a lot of stress came off the Pathfinder design team, or at least their need to be constantly publicly addressing issues. A lot of the issues were dropped. A lot of people have settled into whether they're going to wait and see, whether they have already given up on 2nd edition. At least like things have settled. It's a much more comfortable place, even if it wasn't it's not the same community it was before the 2nd edition playtest started.
Yeah. And we're here. And while we were talking, we were focusing on the rules aspect. Like you said, Luis had showed us like some of the parting books from 1st edition, some of the last soft covers. They're really exciting stuff, and part of me is just like, and then they errated the shifter. The shifter is actually pretty exciting to play with all of its errata applied, and there's a lot of content coming out that's like, man, I wish I had more time with this edition to really just dive into this stuff because it's really good. But the world of Pathfinder is what I fell in love with. It's what converted me, and they're not pulling a what Wizards does. They're not nuking the world every single time they do an edition change. I mean, what they did to the realms was criminal. I mean, sorry. They just, like, getting rid of every character almost that I love in one fell swoop. Not a good way to keep me invested in the setting, and the reason I went looking for another setting to play my games in. And ultimately what, like, them nuking the Forgotten Realms is why I ever picked up a book with Pathfinder on the cover. And thankfully, while the setting will be evolving, it's just mostly the story continuing going forward. Well, what they're saying, at least. They have promised it's not going to be a time of troubles.
I made the 4th edition comparison earlier, so I should emphasize 4th edition means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. A lot of people just remember 4th edition as the really just maddening marketing that started it off, saying where it just felt like people playing the currently supported edition felt targeted and almost wanted 4th edition to fail as a result. That's definitely not what happened here. Then there's the game that came out, and the game had a lot of problems in errata. That is what I was reminded of regularly for the second edition playtest. But even if that stuff hadn't been there, fourth edition wouldn't have been the game for me, just because of how things were distributed and worked out. And there was more of that than I was comfortable with in the second edition playtest.
Right.
And then finally, there is the system stuff, where it's like there are some people that Dungeons and Dragons is the settings to them, and fourth edition decided those settings we're starting over with all the settings because we don't want it to be alienating to new players. But instead of rebooting it, they killed it. They said, like, it is now the future. Everything that happened before is backstory. Everyone is dead. So it's like, it's not even like you can fill in your blanks, you can figure out what happened. Your adventures are the actual conclusion to the setting. It's like, nope, we've moved on. Your adventures are minor, insignificant things. So again, that's not what Paizo is doing. Of the 4 or 5 things you can point at as issues with fourth edition, Paizo did 1 or 2 of those with the playtest. Let's see. There's a couple of chats, questions and comments, and I don't want to move on too quickly. Dragon Elvish says, anyone found a difference in binding of the playtest printed in Canada and the recent hardcover, maybe from China? Was there issues with binding for the playtest? I remember Starfinder there definitely was.
There wasn't, because the playtest was not printed in China. The playtest was printed in, I forget where, but it was North America somewhere.
If it's not China, odds are it's Canada.
Okay. Well then,
we have so much pulp and paper industry up here.
Well, that sounds accurate then, but it was printed somewhere in North America, so different printers. Yeah, Starfinder totally had the same binding problems that a lot of the recent Pathfinder books have been having, and that's maddening. When they put so much work into a book and you like a book so much, it is so disheartening when it literally starts falling apart and you've done nothing to it.
Darren Caldemeyer is pointing out we never got we never got past second printing for the Advanced Player's Guide, and even though there was a lot of errata for that book, it was never applied in print. That's true. And that goes back to what I was saying about second edition doesn't have to be perfect. We all lived with our house rules about how you deal with a summoner at your table.
Right. And ultimately became Unchained Summoner.
Yes. Ultimately. But, that's still... It was not the most elegant solution. It was the best solution without flat out saying rip out those pages from your Advanced Player's Guide. Then Bard Wannabe says, I see a number of cons still offering a lot of the playtest scenarios, and I wonder how smart that is, considering we are being told the real version of 2E will be quite different. So I think what we were talking about there is that there is 2 sides to all of the playtest material. One is the face value. How fun is this as just playing this system as it was, as though this is Pathfinder 1.5 or whatever, like its own edition. Because it's something that existed in print. It's not an official edition, but it is something that at any time anyone can pick up and play. And as you said, Param, the Pathfinder Society scenarios that were built based on the playtest were popular. And I feel like they got more popular the further we got into the playtest, because people were just saying it's not necessarily the playtest that's the problem, it's Doomsday Dawn's the problem.
Right, because Doomsday Dawn was stress testing individual aspects of the system because that's the data they needed for their formulas. It's like, well, how far can we push this before it breaks? Like, literally, they were saying things like that. How far can we push this before it breaks? And they found out. Whereas the scenarios were designed like traditional Pathfinder Society scenarios. So just the same amount of fun encounters and interesting storylines that you were used to. I mean... It was not until I played that GM, that first Pathfinder, like that first Doomsday Dawn, I was like, oh, this seemed real rough. And then I got to play that Pathfinder Society scenario, and I think that's where me and you took our turn, where I started to get a little bit more optimistic because I saw it in its good light. I was like, oh, this is how this works. This is how monsters work. This is why the monster system works this way. This is how encounter mode works and why it's useful. And that was fun, and the players that played in my society scenarios were overall more positive about the second edition than the players that played in when I ran Doomsday Dawn.
You said encounter mode. I believe you mean exploration mode.
Exploration mode, yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a problem with. I did have a problem with encounter mode because I found those Doomsday Dawn monsters awful.
Well,
But
man, you should
encounter
have
mode
played
was
those society monsters. They're great.
I know.
Well,
I've
I don't know.
heard
We got to
that.
those elementals in Doomsday Dawn, and that's when we started to see that system shine. Like when we hit that
Yes.
air elemental that first time, and it poofed, and we're like, "Wait, that's brilliant." And then
So
we
I'm
had
glad
to.
that's how it came off on the player side, because on the GM side, it was just like, I wish this was still first edition monsters, because I know that there's like, it's a not a Venn diagram, a Rube Goldberg machine where it's like there's all these things, and I understand the rules and how they interact with each other, whereas it feels like all I have is the stat block in in the playtest, and it was like there's things that logically should be in there, but unless it's specifically stated in here, this is where the monster begins and ends. And I want, like, as I was thinking of, oh, here's these monsters would be better if there was a little bit more like things that are common across all monsters, and then there are things that are common across monsters of a certain type. And I was basically retrofitting playtest monsters into a first edition system.
Right. But like I said, like when we hit that, when we fought the fire elemental and the earth elemental, and then we got to the air elemental, and we started seeing how they were very different monsters from each other, and they were doing things that basically they had a gimmick and they ran on that gimmick. And yeah, I guess from the GM side, it's just like, this is the gimmick, and that's how 4th edition monsters were too. And I know we keep putting it back to 4th edition. I imagine that's also how 5th edition monsters are, but I'm less familiar. Like, I've played a lot of 5th edition, but I've never GM'd any of it, so I don't know how it works from the GM side of the screen. And honestly, that's how about 2nd edition monsters. 3rd edition was the outlier. I mean, maybe the glorious outlier, but it's the only edition that works the way that you're praising. And like when that monster disappeared when we hit it, and we figured out that that's what it did, and then all in all our brains, you could like, we were just like, okay, so we have to adapt our tactics because we have to hit it big once and not rely on multiple hits, and not because we're only going to get one hit, so we need to set up these big swings if we're going to fight this thing, or we need to at least limit where it can hit us at when it's. And that was exciting tactics for players that a lot of times in Pathfinder, even 1st edition, it's monsters sometimes have their gimmick, but a lot of monsters, because they're so similar to players, it becomes the 5-foot shuffle fight. And I always want to shake up the 5-foot shuffle fight sometimes. Like, there's some standout monsters, and all my favorite monsters do not do the 5-foot shuffle. But when you're fighting hill giants and stone giants and stuff, and these are just like hit points with attack blocks, then they're less exciting.
I am surprised that there are so many adventure paths that revolve around fighting a lot of giants, because one giant encounter from another is not that different.
Oh, that's the only thing I hate about Rise of the Rune Lords is the against the stone giant section, when it's like literally 14 encounters that are just X amount of stone giants plus X amount of dire bears again and again and again and again.
Yeah, at one point in that, I rolled a random encounter, and it was stone giants, and I was like, you know what? A new bestiary just came out. I'm opening it up to a page of a cool monster I saw earlier, and I am completely ignoring the results of that random encounter table, because even I need a break from these stone giants. All right, Param.
Yes.
At some point, we said...
Player questions!
We do have questions. There's still a lot we can talk about, like some of the other releases. One of the early, one of the only hardcover book that came out this year was Planar Adventures, which is a book that I was not looking forward to and ended up loving.
Right. Oh man, it really so. That's another one of the books. It's like, oh man, this is so perfect. This is exactly what I want to see. I really want to play this weird fighter that summons shadow swords. And you know, when I got to make
I also want to play that.
And when I got to make a fighter character for Season's Beatings, which we just wrapped up recording, the last 3 episodes will be going up on the podcast during the Christmas break here. Ended up making just a bog standard fighter at the end because I didn't want to special snowflake myself and detract from the Christmas season themes of the episodes, because that thing got weird enough as it is. But ended up making just a straight up, I have a great sword, I cleave with it build. And people hate on the cleave feats line, but man, when you combine the step up line with the cleave line and also lunge, There's some glorious things that can happen, especially if you expand that crit range.
If I remind me, Planar Adventures came out after the announcement, right?
Yeah.
It was announced before, but it was released after the second edition announcement.
Right.
Yeah, that's right, because we knew it was the swan song for first edition as far as the hardcover line. Yeah, it worked thematically because now you're talking about the high level play, so it's kind of like we're about to level out of first edition and start a new campaign. And a lot of the choices seem to be a little bit aware that this was not going to get played as much as most hardcover options, and so they were a little more gonzo, like that fighter. But very few of them were so nuts that I thought it would actually ruin a game. Most of it just pushed concepts past their limits and didn't care.
Right. It was I loved. Man, we gave that thing such a glowing review, and you're right, it's thematic because almost all the campaigns, maybe not so much, but a lot of adventure paths end with planar travel, and a lot of campaigns end with planar travel. So it is so appropriate that Pathfinder ends with planar travel.
Another release that I really enjoyed was the Martial Arts Handbook, one of the last books coming out for first edition. We've talked about it a lot at this point, and we may still do a proper review of it, but if you want to hear my glowing review of that book, or at least my gushing love for that book, listen to the last episode, our interview with Luis, because that rekindled more of my passion for Pathfinder than almost anything else this year.
I liked the Martial Arts Handbook. I think I liked the Fates of Golarion better, because that reminded me of all this flavor and how good a job that Paizo does with bringing in new concepts and tying in real world concepts and adapting them, and just getting this crazy kitchen sink setting to feel like it was designed intentionally that way, because it was, but there's a lot of kitchen sink settings, and they're one of the few companies that may just make it work well, where I just quit blushing when I see weird barbarians from the north and gunslingers in the same party anymore.
Was that ever an issue for you?
Not really, but it just the way that they, especially with Pathfinder Society and just the flavor of their world, ties all these elements together so often, it just quit seeming like it was any discordant at all.
There were other significant things for Pathfinder that kind of kept my interest as I started questioning just where I fit in the spectrum of Pathfinder fans. One of them was, and this did not get nearly enough love on the podcast, and I regret that, but Spiral of Bones, the latest Pathfinder comic from Dynamite, written by Crystal Fraser, our friend and GM. And not really a network member, but a guest to the network.
Well, I'm calling those guests cast members.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that works. So she's not staff, she's cast. I like it. She's talent.
And she is talent. Oh, Lord.
So I love the Pathfinder comics. I have subscribed to the entire line. I have came out, except I may have missed some that were related to one of the Humble bundles.
Yeah.
But those were all Worldscape, which unfortunately I am just not enthusiastic enough. And that is a subline that needs a specific amount of enthusiasm. So, I still like the main Worldscape comic. I just wasn't invested in it enough to really care about all those spin-offs. But Spiral of Bones is easily my favorite Pathfinder comic series. I was thinking back on it, it's like it was probably one of my favorite, right? And then just thinking back on any other series that came out, and it's like the Jim Zub stuff was good, but it felt like it wanted to be an ongoing series, whereas it also felt like it shouldn't feel like that. It should feel like a series of miniseries. And the fact that then Jim left the series and it became a series of miniseries meant that it's now, in going back to it, it's a little slower and it's a little more far-sighted than it needs to be. Origins came out, and Origins was great, but it also had growing pains of it being written by 3 people that had never written comics before. There were a couple of them that came out on the opposite sides of Worldscape, which were both good. They were fun. They were the ones written by James and Wes. But the fact that I can't even remember the subtitles shows that they were... Oh, no, one of them City of Secrets? And then the other one was fun, and it had them they bump into the rival Pathfinders, which was made up of other Pathfinder iconics, and then getting split up and paired up with evil, or not evil, but like
a lot of them were evil.
Yeah, all right. Some of them were evil. Some of them were just
also there was Elaine.
Good. What's that?
Also Elaine. I don't know what to call Elaine.
Elaine.
Well, I mean, evil or just jerk.
Oh yeah, no, he's selfish. There were a couple of them that were selfish. There were a couple of them that were evil, and that was definitely that might be my second favorite series. But Spiral of Bones was solid. It was so much more focused on Imperasaur has their thoughts about Alain, but I'm not going to repeat it on the podcast because of language reasons. It's not pushing it for our chat, so don't feel bad, Imperasaur, but I'm not going to repeat it on the air.
But we agree.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. Spiral of Bones is really solid storytelling. It's really fun. It's amazing dialogue. It's amazing character work. And even though it was thought of as it is a Valeros story, but the non-Valeros party members all have a lot to do. We get to spend a lot of time with them, which is one of my concerns, because at every series we've kind of seen a smaller and smaller group. We lost Harsk, we lost Ezrin, and it just felt like now we're down to a Valeros solo series, but it's not a Valeros solo series. Valeros is the thrust of the plot, and then you've got the Valeros plot and the rest of the party plot, both of which are engaging and fun. And Crystal did an amazing job, and there has not been another Pathfinder comic announced to follow up on Spiral of Bones. I really hope that it's just because Paizo is focusing on second edition and all of that was an all hands on deck project. And I hope once a hand or two gets freed, we get some more Pathfinder comics, because there are still more Pathfinder stories that could be told about the Iconics. I love the Iconics far more having read them in the comics than I did when they were just cool characters that we saw in recurring art and wacky situations. Para, anything else Pathfinder anything else Pathfinder related that you want to bring up?
Accessories have been really sweet this last year, because they don't need to worry about additions with them. I mean, the new flip tiles line that Stephen Ray McFarlane came on to talk about, I've been loving those. The pawns have been fantastic the entire time, and boy knows I'm going to get use out of those in another edition. Though I do wonder, does this mean we're going to get new bestiary boxes? And how much of the overlap is that going to be? So that's going to be interesting to see how that goes. I can't imagine the bestiary is going to be a 1-to-1 match, so to old bestiary. It won't be this. I imagine it's not going to be a 1-to-1 overlap of every single monster in first edition bestiary 1 is every single monster in first edition bestiary, second edition bestiary 1. And if it's the same in bestiary 2, then Lord knows something went off the rails.
And it will probably not be the same art. It's guaranteed to not be the same art. I don't think that they would reuse that much art, because the art in general and art technology has advanced in the 10 years since Bestiary 1 came out, that they would be doing themselves a disservice if they reused any of that art. This is their chance to do a free, a do-over. Any artist will look at their old material and be like, oh, if I could just do that over, now's their chance.
Especially a particular bear. They updated that bear art, by the way. If you look in new printings of it, if you download the PDF.
That's the Dire Bear you're talking about?
Yeah, the Dire Bear. The first edition PDF, but if you look at it, and the soft cover, because I got the flippy soft cover bestiary, and I was wanting to show somebody, it's hey, there's one, I meant, I told the story that Eric told on some podcast, there's one piece of art they didn't like, and then I flipped to it, and oh, that's not it. Because I miss that bear. He's terrible, but I miss him.
For anyone not in the know, in third edition, they Wizards of the Coast decided that if an animal is dire, it has bones and rocks growing out of its skin. And the second edition, the first edition Pathfinder Dire Bear was a holdover for that. Oh, there we go. Oyland Green was asking, what's the bear art? Yeah, the Pathfinder Dire Bear has rocks for shoulders, which is the only dire animal that has that. Also, we got a lot fewer dire animals in Pathfinder than we did in third edition.
The new art still has rocks on the shoulders, but it's not.
Does it?
It's not quite.
Why is there new art that still has rocks on the shoulders?
Consistency.
Then what was the problem with the art? I
don't know, Costello.
Wow. I I just assumed, but what other assumption is there to make that if they're updating that art, they're getting rid of the rocks on the shoulders?
Well, it has less of a dumb expression on its face.
Was the expression that bad? I don't remember it being that
bad. There's a reason we called it Derpy Bear.
Did we?
I
thought
did.
we just said, like, why is this the only animal that still has rocks on him? Well, then. I doubt second edition Dire Bears, if they even have them, I doubt they will have rocks on their shoulders.
Oh, yeah, definitely
Also,
not. Because the ones that appear in Rise of the Rune Lords don't have rocks on the shoulders. And the miniature doesn't either. He just got extra long fangs.
Another thing about updating the art is that the Bestiary 1 was not made with these pawn boxes in mind. The pawn boxes didn't come out until a couple of years later. So now that they know that this is a top-selling product for them, and I know Eric, when he was on the show, was even saying, I don't know if we're going to actually update all of those pawn boxes. I suspect that even if they don't know if they're going to update them, they are moving forward as though that's an option, and so the art will be made with a little bit more of staying within a confined space and being able to replicate it as a pawn in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect them to update the pawn boxes for the first edition ones, but like, when the new Bestiary comes out, the monsters aren't going to be the same. It's going to need its own box. And then when Bestiary 2 comes out, or whatever they call the Bestiary, there's no guarantee this thing is called the Bestiary. There's no guarantee any of the lines keep the names they had, because it's been 10 years. And you've got 10 years to come up with new, better ideas.
Wow, they might not call Core Rulebook the Core Rulebook.
Yeah. I expect it'll be called the Core Rulebook, though. Because they repeated it with Starfinder.
That's true.
But when Starfinder, the new book coming out that is obviously its Advanced Player's Guide, the Character Operations Manual, I was really expecting them to just call it the Advanced Player's Guide, and it's not. So, hey, maybe not.
One thing that took a lot of getting used to when I stopped being a Dungeons & Dragons player and being a Pathfinder player was how bland some of those hardcover books were called. Like the Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide and Monster Manual were so evocative, and yet Core Rulebook is as vanilla a name as you can get for your core rulebook. And Bestiary is more evocative, but it also, before Pathfinder really caught on, Bestiary was problematic because some people called it Bestiary. And then if you're ordering it from a game store and they're typing into their system Bestiary and putting that A in there, they're not finding the book. So it was like, it was more problematic than it probably should have been.
They should have just called it the Menagerie. Then nobody could spell it correctly.
That's true. That might even be a word with different British spelling from American spelling.
I have no idea.
Us Canadians, we are loyal to that queen. Queen Siglish or death, Param. Yeah, that's right. I sensed you were about to pick
I'll start throwing U's in my language randomly if you want me to,
Thank
Ryan.
you. Calor.
Oh man, I am looking forward to it because we still haven't heard what's going to happen to the softcover line or anything like that. We have no idea what the strategy plan is going forward. And regardless of which edition of the game you're going to be playing, those campaign setting books are still going to be those campaign setting books.
But the soft, like, you're talking about the ones that are already out are going to be the ones?
Well, I mean, campaign setting material is still going to be this, like, it's the same world you're going to be playing in, so.
Right, because they said that they're going to they're doing away with the division between rules and.
Oh, I didn't mean that, Ryan. I meant like. They said they're not going to just revisit all the places they visited in first edition because they visited them. So we still have not got much Arcadia stuff. So if they put out a big Arcadia book for second edition and you're a first edition player, you probably want to read that anyway.
I'm sorry that was so complicated for me to understand, Param. I don't think that was you. I think that.
All right. So one of the things about this episode is we polled for questions, and this is a great, huh?
We're not talking about Kingmaker?
Oh, yeah. I just was looking at the time, man. We've been in
all right. If
Kingmaker's awesome.
On Kingmaker, we had a whole episode on Kingmaker.
Yeah, Kingmaker's awesome. You can see me play the beginning of it if you want to on our YouTube channel. I do funny voices for all the characters. It was a blast.
Very good.
Okay,
as you were saying.
Yeah, so we polled pretty much on all our channels questions. So, and live chat, more than ever we need your questions. So please ask any questions you have of us. We've got a bunch of questions we collected Basically almost a anything goes format. So we will be running down those questions. We got them from Facebook, Discord, Twitter, email, comments on posts. They came in from all angles.
And you know what? I did say anything goes, and I am surprised that people they didn't just go as deep into like, oh, what are our real feelings about certain things. Like, no, it was the kind of questions we would usually get, just in a much greater volume. I was actually super encouraging the number of questions we got. I've been looking forward to this episode more to do the questions, even though when we announced it was going to be a year-end special.
All right. So let's get a question.
Our very first question comes from Patreon. It was asked by Andrew Mullen. He says, y'all have been doing No Direction for a while. What does the network mean to you?
Oh, good Lord. That's a question.
It is. You had access to these questions, Barum. You should have known this one was coming for a while.
Quit messing with my performance, Costello. No, okay. Yeah, I've seen that question for days now. But it doesn't make it any easier to answer. Because it is such a huge sweeping question. I don't know, but like about 5 years ago, or probably even more recently than that, I realized that I quit thinking of myself as a web designer and started thinking of myself as a podcaster, because what defined my life and what I do changed, and it's being able to interact with this industry, to work on material for the podcast, to do entertaining things, to be a internet personality, to dip my toes in design work, to do reporting stuff. That has become so much more of what I am than taking care of websites for businesses ever was.
It's funny. I have a very similar feeling because I started the whole network just to have it as part of my platform as a designer. That it's like, here's my website with these blog reviews, and it has a podcast, because podcasts were new and innovative when the internet started. And now hopefully you'll hire me to do design work for you. And since then, I've passed up design opportunities because I want time to focus on the network, and I'd rather be writing my blog than writing somebody else's material based on following their outline. And my day job, like, I am effectively a full-time game designer, and yet when I think of myself in the game industry and my place in it, I think of myself as a podcaster. And something else, a couple of things happened this year specifically, one of which was that the network felt like it was more on not on autopilot, but it runs itself really efficiently. And so I have a lot less stress about the day-to-day, and things like our outlines have gone, like, they used to be a lot tighter, and we've gotten to loosen up. And I just know that an episode starting, we've got a title. That's enough that if we really only have that title, you and I can get through 2 hours and have an entertaining and interesting conversation about stuff.
Yeah, we have gone off the rails on outlines so often, and sometimes it really has been just the title, but we're not going to tell you which episodes those were.
It also was driven home just how big the network is when I was doing my Christmas cards. And, anytime we add American addresses to our Christmas cards, it's just that much more expensive to deliver them. And Tina was like, you're sending 11 cards to the States just for your network? And it's like, yeah, I guess I am. Like, we're a massive blogging network at this point. We've got a lot of podcasts, and they're like, I'm not sending a Christmas card to Crystal. That's someone I definitely could have. Like, there's people now, we have divisions of the people that are on the network. There's staff, there's cast, there's administrators, which is more or less just you and I. And people are enthusiastic and willing to do more things. So Vanessa's been doing a lot of our editing.
She's been so good at that. So good. You Seasons Beatings has been all Vanessa.
And then the other thing that the network has, the other evolution of the network this year was just how legitimate we feel. Like, that Gen Con invitation to join in Jason's game and preview second edition, that was a huge invitation. And for every time that we thanked them for the invitation, they were like, no, thank you for being a part of it, thank you for taking part of it. And it's like, how is that an equal thank you to what we're thanking you for? You have to understand that we are the ones thanking you. This was an amazing opportunity. Not only that, like, we brought it. We had a lot of fun. People really responded to what was going on. Like, everyone on that stage deserved to be on that stage, and that includes us. Whereas, you know, you could let Imposter Syndrome weigh in and be like, no, you guys lucked into that. No. We were as much a part of that as anyone else on the stage, and that was a blast. And then we just got a nice little boost of confidence. Lauren brought to my attention that College Humor has started an actual play podcast called Dimension 20. It's 5th edition actual play, but this year's the year of actual play. So, like, most people that work in comedy are a nerd. Most of them have fond memories of Dungeons and Dragons role-playing games, and so this year people are just swooping in and launching this stuff. So that's why this one might be under the radar. But she assures me that it's quality and that she's learning how she's going to adapt how she plays on Adventurous based on things she is learning from watching them play Dimension 20. And so she reached out to Brennan from College Humor, who is the GM, and just said, like, I really like what you're doing, and if we could ever have the opportunity to talk about how to perform as a role-playing game, I would appreciate it. To which Brennan replied, "Oh my gosh, I'm extremely familiar with your work, Lauren, and like, he is a fan of hers. He has most likely through what she does on the network, the Dear Dova Queen article. And this is College Humor. This is one of the staples of the internet, as far as I'm concerned. And the fact that we've got that kind of reach is really, it's as encouraging as it is kind of shocking."
Yeah, I mean, every time there's somebody I look up to, like, we've had more on the download, but we've had some pseudo celebrities that have been fans of the work. When I find out, I'm like, oh wow, I never expected that. But this year it's really hit home on just like the amount of fan mail we're getting, the amount of feedback we're getting, and some of the people that are giving it to us. It's like, I'm trying not to let it get to our heads, obviously, because we're just some nerds that do something awesome, and it became something. And, you know, when we went to the conventions, it's constant just shaking fan hands and chatting with people. I'm really glad we got that opportunity. I do feel fortunate, even if we put in the work, because we've been doing this for a decade, Ryan. We have put in the work.
I've been doing it a decade and then some.
Yeah. Oh boy. But even then, like there's a lot of people that. Oh, sorry. Even
like, I was trying to do the math. You came out on like the 4th year of the 35privatesanctuary.com existing, right?
Right. I came in like the first year of No Direction existing. I guested on some of those early episodes, and then you brought me on.
Anyway, continue.
But there's a lot of people that do the work, and they don't get those opportunities. So I feel super lucky that we've ever gotten them, and the people we've gotten to know and meet, and some of the opportunities, especially that are showing up now, because some of the shows we're putting out and planning and that are in production are ambitious, like Adventurous. Oh my God, Adventurous. Sponsored by Roll20. We've got Crystal Frazier as an amazing GM for us, a talented cast that some of the best people I've ever gotten the chance to roleplay with. It's pure joy every time we get to do one of those episodes. And the reception we're getting from it is incredibly encouraging. And for years we avoided we would talk about actual plays, and it's like, no, if we want to do it right. And it's been like, no, we're not going to do it. No, we're not going to do it. No, we're not going to do it. And then we did it.
You got our next question?
Yeah, okay, so this one is coming in from David Slade via Facebook. Oh boy. Do you expect we'll see another third-party publisher pick up the 3.x/PF1 torch after the release of 2nd edition? If so, any predictions/hopes as to who does?
So first of all, yes. As soon as 2nd edition was announced, third-party people were saying, is somebody going to Pathfinder? Like that just became an expression in the industry of Pathfinder. Even before the 2nd edition playtest came out, and it seemed like it was polarizing, the concept and basically the access, the availability, the legal ability to do that meant that somebody has to be picking up the slack there. So any hopes or predictions as to who does? No, I'm not going to go into that part of the question. But I can definitely say that I've heard rumblings. There's definitely a lot of people that are been attached to this concept, and this is something that I have a feeling hear more in the coming months, in the first few months of 2019.
Right. I mean, and there is at least a couple of those projects that have been announced. One in particular done by, like, already has product out there you can buy on, but they've been doing it even since before the announcement. Man, I forget the name. Sorry for bringing that up. But yeah, somebody's going to totally
I have a guess, but I don't want to say who it is just in case that says something that...
right.
Just in case it tips somebody's hat and I'm wrong.
Right.
Somebody's hand.
Yeah, but somebody's definitely going to. Who that is, I won't go into.
Chris L. Kimball via Discord. Hi, Chris. He's the artist for our unconditional cards. He says, no direction has changed a lot this year with the Patreon, the Discord, adding adventures, etc. What do you feel has been the most impactful addition in terms of the No Direction brand?
Gosh. I think Adventurous has to be the most impactful, don't you think, Ryan?
I was going to say the Discord.
The Discord. Oh, man, I love our Discord so much. You guys are awesome. Hey, if you're a fan of ours and you want to talk to us or talk to any of the other fans, join the Discord. It's also the most chill and least toxic place to talk about Pathfinder. It doesn't matter which edition you're a fan of, or even if we don't have a lot of card game players on there, but hey, if there are, you can talk about it there. But like, unfortunately, the Pathfinder fandom has pockets of it in certain areas that have just gotten a reputation of being just incredibly hostile and toxic. And our Discord is this nice little oasis away from it all. Come have fun with us. Plus, you get to talk with, network members pretty much anytime. We're constantly on it. There's somebody on there just about any time of the day.
It's also one of the original purposes of the site was a message board. The reason it was the private sanctuary was for people to come together and talk about, at the time, 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons. And that community thing kind of died out when most message boards died out and Facebook became a thing. And at one point we got rid of the message board because it just had gone stagnant, and there was outcry that was like, no, the message board is as much to me as the site is about the message board as much as the podcast is. So we brought it back, and nobody posted in it, and it was like, it's dreaming, guys. We all loved the time that we had the message board up, but clearly it's just not how we communicate anymore. We moved over primarily to Facebook, which has been fine and has its ups and downs, but never really had the interaction that we liked on the message boards. And I felt at arm's length from the community when we were on Facebook. I felt like we were putting something at them, and maybe they will come back to us. Whereas in the Discord, we're interacting. It's everything that I liked about the message board, plus everything that was great about the chat that Liz used to run, Liz Quartz. And it really filled a void that I think the community needed. And I liked how Alex described it in the last No Direction Beyond, where it's just at any time you can not direct message us. You can @ any member of the network, and odds are we will pop up very soon after to reply to it. And even when no network member is actively part of the conversation, conversations are going on, which is really encouraging to own thing that we just happen to have, planted the seeds for.
And it's grown too. I mean, it started off just being like a generic chat room, and then as we got more members, I mean, gosh, there's hundreds of y'all now on there. We had to grow it, so like now there's specific chats for Pathfinder, playtest, Starfinder, and then we realized that we're nerds and we all have nerdy interests. So then there became a video game chat and an anime chat, and I mean, as long as there's a significant community in our community that's interested in something, we'll keep growing it to fit the needs.
What I also like is that we used to have a Slack channel for the staff where we would, communicate and coordinate. The fact that we've moved it to Discord means that we can be interacting with our fans on the same platform as we're interacting with each other. And there were a couple of times early on in the Discord where there would just be kind of like nerdy chat going on in the staff channel. And I'm like, go out and talk to the fans to have this conversation. Like, we've got these official channels so we can interact with things that we don't want put out there or that are too boring to put out there. But if you just want to chat amongst yourselves amongst the community. And that's pretty much became the mantra for how we use Discord, and it really picked up from there.
And Patreon definitely has had its influence, and a lot of that's being stress relief.
Yes.
We didn't want, like, early on we had advertisers, but advertisers has always, we always felt weird about our ads. Because, you know, if somebody's...
there's 3 parts to it.
Yeah.
One is that it's work.
Oh, yeah.
And the network is fun, but while we appreciated the income, and I really liked when we were doing stuff with Chimera Games where it was just free reign to be wacky with my advertisements, and at one point they couldn't afford to pay for the ads, and I just kept doing them because they were basically a segment on the show at that point. But like soliciting ads and having anything that actually depends on having a regular ad revenue, that became a slog. Plus, Paizo is not going to advertise with us because we are so much free advertising for them that, like, what are they going to get by putting an ad on? What kind of return are they going to get on an ad? Other than if they were just specifically trying to sponsor us. And at that point, because we're also a news show, we're not just a fan show, it was like, then it would blur the lines. So we'd actually be turning to third-party publishers and asking them for ad revenue, and that is a very minimal profit venture for them. Like, you have to be very tight with your money, and while an ad on our site would really put it out there, asking any amount based on what would be worth the work for us is probably outpricing them for what they can reasonably afford.
Yeah.
And then there's just, if we bring somebody on that's a sponsor, kind of like what I was just talking about Paizo. If somebody's a sponsor and we don't bring them on the podcast, what does that say about them? Does that say that we're taking an ad that we're not actually excited enough to have them on as an interview? But if we do take them on, does that mean that they're buying that interview time? Like, it was just like, the kind of ads we would be getting, it's just messy.
Right. And then the alternative is,
we didn't want to.
I don't want to do mattress commercials. I don't want to sell Squarespace. Like, the other obvious ads we could get are the same ones.
You spend a third of your life sleeping. Don't you want a good mattress?
I do not spend a third of my life sleeping. That's a problem.
Oh, no. Parent, you need a better mattress.
I mean, and I definitely don't want to do boxer shorts commercials because that's the new thing. No. I guess it's just weird. Though I guess we say this, but we now have sponsors.
Yes, that's true. We've got Roll20. So that's the kind of people that we could be getting. We could potentially talk to Dogmite and Wormwood and Gaming Tables. Those people where it's like they've got larger margins, they could afford it, and they need to get the word out in a way that other content is good. Oh, Creeper Coffin's talking about Audible. Yeah. Audible was everywhere in podcasts for a couple of years. So, yeah, if we wanted to do the solicitation route and put the work in, now there are advertisers that we can get. But the Patreon, I like it. I think it's a simpler solution. It goes back to, like, the PBS model. And the fact that there is return that it's almost like a mini Kickstarter in that we do have rewards for our backers. And it's, like you said, stress relief. Don't forget the major crash we had with 1&1 earlier this year, right before PaizoCon.
Oh my good God.
Where it looked like the network was in jeopardy, where technical issue that they just were refusing to help us with could have potentially cost us everything. And luckily, with the help of Stephen from the
Roll for Combat.
Roll for Combat, yeah, we were able to get past that, but it's not a coincidence that the Patreon launched shortly after that. We did have plans for the Patreon going back over a year, but I have a lot of plans. This was the kick in the butt to actually put those plans into motion.
Yeah, and it's been successful, and also, like, we have lots of plans on how we're going to spend some of that money, and we're still exploring it. It has let us expand the network. We wouldn't have taken on Adventurous or any of the other ventures without the Patreon going. But it also, we had been paying, because we wouldn't take on sponsors. Me and Ryan, mostly Ryan, but it hurt my wallet too. All of that has been coming out of our pockets. This network has been funded by us personally, and
we did have the Kickstarter.
And the Kickstarter, thank you. The Kickstarter helped with the equipment upgrades and helped out there a lot too.
Yeah, that was when my computer was crashing and I could not edit or record audio on it anymore. And it was basically, yes, you're paying for like I'm buying a new computer. The Kickstarter helped me pay for the extra equipment to make me be able to continue to do this stuff. So most of that Kickstarter money was spent right away on that and the camera, which allowed us to upgrade our con coverage, which definitely became one of the first things we were known for as a network.
Right. Yeah. And but even with the Kickstarter, we were still spending monthly out of our personal accounts to keep this network up.
Which, like, we had larger and larger server needs.
Oh my gosh. I'm so glad there's so many of you. But there are so many of you, and that means that our network has grown every year without fail. There's always been more of you the next year than there were the year before, and that meant the cost of running the network kept going up every single year.
There was also more content. Like every con, we would cover more seminars. We were putting out more podcasts. We've got a lot more spin-offs. All of that stuff adds to the monthly upkeep of having this website.
And then we have to justify our time in this. Like before the right around the time we were doing the Kickstarter, it was like, we're doing as much as we can do this and still call it a hobby. I mean, we're not, there's no salaries involved right now, but I don't want to go into too much details on the financials of the network, but it became real obvious like that. Like, this can't be a hobby if we keep upping the game. It's going to eventually become more than that. And then we said that, we agreed to it, and then we kept growing anyway.
Yep, kept adding more bloggers, kept adding more podcasts. The more live stream stuff, that's been throttling my internet. I have to keep getting bigger and bigger data packages. So yeah, costs were going up. And the Patreon has really helped with that. And I think the reason I would call the Discord more significant for No Direction as a brand than the Patreon is because the Patreon runs so much in the background, whereas the Discords put people right in front of our faces.
Yeah. And we get to really interact with it, with our that's what matters. I mean, just getting to work with our fans and get that feedback and just feel like we still have a connection to our community.
We've spent a lot of time on this question, but you did say at the beginning that you think adventure was the most significant thing, and then we spent time talking about Patreon. So I'm curious what it was about Adventurous that was your gut reaction.
Because Adventurous is fundamentally different than anything else we've done. That's when we quit being news people and started being entertainment. Like, we've always been entertainment. This is Personality Media. We're Enthusiast Press. There's a bunch of different names for what we do for this podcast. But that's when we started to actually do entertainment-based production, and it's a different rollout. We're getting different fans that like us for different reasons. It's definitely had the most change on how we present the network.
Are you suggesting that Dwarfed wasn't entertaining, Parham?
I'm suggesting that Dwarfed was a long time ago.
It was.
And it never was a flagship.
No, it was not. It was a curiosity. For anyone that's curious, Dwarfed is an original audiobook that I put out on the network based on a screenplay that I was actually trying to sell to make a movie out of. And it's got all my little criticisms of Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, all those things that at the time I felt like the only person who was willing to be critical of them. I still think it's a fun, good time. It's probably only, I think it is 2 hours of listening because it was supposed to be a movie. Track it down. Maybe I'll share a link to it. Actually, I'll share a link to it tomorrow on Facebook as like a Throwback Thursday thing.
Next question. Brian Lane via Discord. Paizo calls you and asks you to name one new feature, rule, class, feat, etc. of the Pathfinder playtest that definitely gets included in 2nd edition. What do you choose and why? So I think the key here is that it's something that was in the playtest, not anything we invent.
That is how I read it first, but having you read it out loud where he said started to make me question, oh wait, does he say we add a new thing to 2nd edition that wasn't in the playtest? But no, I believe your interpretation was my original interpretation as well. So the thing I want the most in the playtest is the in 2nd edition is the 3-action economy system. I think that was one of the first things they talked about in the previews because they knew this was a game changer, that the benefits of it were obvious and the implementation was almost perfect.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say that, because in this scenario, Paizo's probably going to put that anyway, and I should be looking for the kind of thing that nobody else might say, or the thing that might not realize. So good. I'm going to talk about the new swimming and fly rules, because
I think you're the only one to talk about the new swimming and fly
bears
rules.
in first edition. Why do we need it to be so tightly simulationist, and facing matters when you're flying, but no other point in the game? Angles matter, but no other point in the game. And while swimming, it only happens from time to time. You'll have the one aquatic level in Adventure Path. Flying happens after a certain point if you have a certain type of character in your party. So most campaigns will devolve into a campaign where you are dealing with the flying more than you're dealing with anything else in a single encounter. And it's baffling that it's that complicated. And I wrote a behind the screens article about this, just summarizing this is how you would retrofit these new rules into first edition, and it is so simple. It is exactly as simple as everything else about movement is in the game. So that is definitely the thing. It's like flying and swim should be simple. It should not be a hindrance to the entire game, especially flying. Param?
I hate the flying rules of 3.5 so much.
Oh, okay.
So much. And I avoid the swimming rules because I avoid aqua adventures entirely. So there's an entire concept of adventure that I avoid because of how much I dislike the water rules. And so I agree with you there. That's a good thing. I would never have called that out. I'm going to call out one that I think I want backgrounds to make it for sure. However they do character creation, like I do hope there's some changes there, but I want background to be one of the choices you make when creating a character, because it takes the trait system and really gets rid of all the funky parts of that kind of made it a pain, and it really helps just drive in a lot of RP into your character real quick. And it works so great with Starfinder, and I think Pathfinder 2 playtested it that much better. Of all the things that I think might not make it in, I think that's one of the ones that I want to definitely make it in.
I really did the background system because I felt it restricting from an RP point of view, and the way it worked in playtests, where it's coupled with your ability scores, meant that you couldn't have the character is like this, but he's also this. He's a stable boy, but he was actually the son of a king, and so like, nope, because or he's the stable boy who was a paladin for some reason. Like, oh no, you've got two different things that you want to explore the contrast. No, because then your ability scores are not going to make any sense, and you're going to be a terrible character. And it's like, oh, that is something that, for all the obvious benefits, ruins the game for me.
I didn't say I wanted to keep the background tied to ability scores, Ryan. I said that I wanted backgrounds to exist. Like in Starfinder, they are not tied with ability scores, and I like them that way. I do think that your background should definitely be tied with a skill you get, because that makes sense. If you were a blacksmith, you should know something about hitting things with a hammer.
That was one of the early compliments for Sela. Her Sela is the paladin, but she has a roguish background, and she felt like a more roguish paladin than you would expect based the pre-generated version of her for the playtest. So in that way, yes, that works for me.
Yeah, that's what I want to preserve. I thought that the ability generation score was an interesting experiment, and I like Traveler too. But ultimately, I think that's maybe a more free-form, point-based or role-based. Honestly, I prefer point-based. I know you don't. Would have been a better way to go there, but I do want backgrounds instead of traits.
Okay. I think I need more backgrounds before I feel like I'm not just settling into a rut. Well, not a rut, but settling into a role.
Well, there's like 1,500 traits. I think we'll get a lot of backgrounds.
Traits were always confusing. It's like, oh, here's a new book. Here's 50 new traits. It's like, why? Shadows over Scotland via Discord. Oh, has several questions. First one, I will leave to you, Param. Starfinder. We just got 3 new classes. Is there an area or niche that you can see as missing from the classes with the current lineup?
We don't have a pet class yet. Well, we do that they're robots, but I mean, we don't have a class that runs around with an alien friend. And I don't mean Chewbacca, but that would also be that would be a weird way to do it. But we don't have a pet-based class for Starfinder yet that isn't a robot. So I would like to see some sort of like alien beast tamer or weird alien creature rider for Starfinder, and that's an area that I think it could use.
What about more arcane?
Well, it's really hard to figure out how that's going to be, because the Witch Warper is kind of hitting a lot of that note right now. So if the Witch Warper grows in that direction, it can kind of become the arcane caster of Starfinder. Prepared casting is still something they've not touched on yet, or 9th level spell casting is not something that they've explored yet. So I don't know. But that's areas that are obvious going forward that they'll have to look at. But it's just refining concepts that exist, whereas the alien tamer would be like an entirely different concept that's not touched on at all.
Pathfinder related question. This is still from Shadows over Scotland. There's going to be a few of his questions in a row, or their questions in a row. Favorite venture captain in universe?
Oh, so it can't be Chad Newman. Green Shane. Hands down, Green Shane.
Yeah?
Yeah, he's just the right kind of goofy for me.
I like Aramze, but that's because I GM more Pathfinder Society than I play it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like playing him like Dr. House.
Mm.
Just sarcastic, angry, resentful of the PCs for you're not even too sure why. He's just always in a bad mood, and he's taking it out on you.
I do like, well, I guess I won't be doing too much of it any longer, but I do like role-playing Colton Madras, because I get my drill sergeant voice on for any time I run Colton.
Now, we've mentioned the Master of Spells, the Master of Swords, and the Master of Scrolls. I believe they're all technically venture captains, but just in case they aren't, I have a backup, and it's Sheila Hydemarch. And
Oh!
One of the reasons she's my favorite is because there was an entire comic run where she plays a prominent role. And so when I have her in a scenario, not only do I have the face card for her, I can pull out multiple pages of the comic and be like, here's how she looks when she's walking towards you. Here's how she looks when she's listening to you pensively. And so that adds an extra level of how I can present the character. I can have the comic dancing around while she's talking, so it looks like she's the one talking. Because when people talk, they go like, Before we move on, Dungeon Novice says, Param said back when Starfinder was announced, it's hard to justify studying for years to cast a fireball spell when incendiary grenades exist. So I'm going to pick up the reason that I said more arcane is because I just finished watching She-Ra, the new the Netflix series.
So good, so good, so good!
It is so good. And Shadow Weaver is just flat out a fantasy character, whereas most everyone else is a blend of fantasy and a little bit of tech. And so I don't think you can, I don't know, but I don't think you could play Shadow Weaver in Starfinder right now.
You can with a Witch Warper. The Witch Warper is super witchy.
Okay. Pathfinder question. Again, Shadows over Scotland. If you were roped into another adventure path that you have not played, GM'd or as a GM or player, which would you suggest to the group?
Gosh, that's a hard question for us.
Why is that?
We've played a lot of these things.
I've only played a few.
I really want to do Legacy of Fire. I really would love to play Legacy of Fire, because I just love the whole Arabian Nights feel, and that thing goes super crazy with the high magic setting and genies and dragons, and it's also got like relaxation scenes, and it's just like it's just that right amount of high fantasy craziness that you don't get a lot of in Pathfinder, because a lot of Pathfinder, at least for the first half of Adventure Path, stays really man on the street level, even past the point that most other forms of D&D is left that behind. Even though eventually we save the world in just about every adventure path, but that thing just goes for the crazy right off the bat.
I think I would say Iron Gods. There we go. I knew the one I was talking about, and I was mixing it up. I knew it wasn't Iron Fang Invasion. Yeah, Iron Gods is different from anything I have ever run or ever played in, and it's different from anything that is even like... I could come up with my own version of a lot of these different adventure paths, whereas Iron Gods is something that's completely... It's such a cool blend of fantasy and science fiction that it's beyond my skills or my instincts as a GM, even as one who does a lot of improvising. On top of that, while I was intrigued by the Pathfinder Society, the year of the Starkey, which was the one that had a lot of Numeria content, it frustrated a lot of people because it was like, it was too invasive because Pathfinder Society had already established what it was. Whereas when you go into it and it's just like, here's a 6-volume chunk of Numeria that you were going to be exposed to, that one I felt a lot more in that situation. I feel a lot more comfortable exploring Numeria content. Plus, it actually goes into Numeria. It goes into everything you've heard about Numeria, and in ways that are very different from how you've experienced other things in adventure paths. Like this one doesn't go to other planes, or at least I wouldn't expect it to. This one goes to other planets. This one goes to other realms of possibility. Plus, I really enjoyed the Pathfinder Tales novel that was set in Numeria, the name of which escapes me, but it was... Finally, Shadow over Scotland wants to know, eggnog, hot or cold?
I got no idea.
Pair. What?
I've never had eggnog. I don't even know what it tastes like. I don't know what eggnog tastes like, and I don't know if I should eat it or not.
Delicious, let me tell you that much. As far as hot or cold, every year around this time, the eggnog lattes come out. It's the winter version of the pumpkin spice latte. And every year I have one, and I remember I just do not like eggnog lattes. I love eggnog. I love a lot of things about eggnog, but I do not like it. Either I don't like it blended with coffee, or I don't like it hot. Now, I've had some experiments with eggnog. I've made my own, which it was a little too thin. One thing I like about eggnog is the thickness. So that recipe didn't work, but I've got a slow cooker recipe for eggnog that I haven't tried yet, but I'm looking forward to. I will probably try that this winter season. I've tried cooking with eggnog. I made eggnog waffles one time that I called Wegnoffles. Here's the thing. Eggnog is basically cream, eggs, and sugar, which is already ingredients in waffle batter and anything else you would be cooking with eggnog. And so it was a slightly richer waffle. It didn't really feel like an eggnog waffle. It didn't feel like the eggnog experience that I enjoy from a glass. So, long story short, nice cold glass of eggnog. Oh, also, so anyone that follows me on Facebook might know that in the last couple of years, I really changed my diet. And after seeing a nutritionist, one of the things that was missing from my diet was protein, which is one of the reasons I was overeating and over snacking, because protein is what fills you up. And so in my mind, I was like, I have a low fat diet, but by cutting out fat, I was also cutting out protein. And then I would be snacking on high fat or high sugar content. So I basically did not have a low fat diet. I had a low protein diet, and it was leaving me constantly hungry. So in the last year, I've been exploring different convenient ways of getting more protein in my diet, especially as someone who doesn't eat a lot of meat. This is my first year since changing my diet of having my eggnog, and I found out there's tons of protein in eggnog, and it fits perfectly into my diet. Like, I can have a nice bran cereal with a glass of eggnog in the morning, and that's basically everything except my nutritionist would still suggest that I find a way to get a vegetable in the breakfast. I have trouble finding breakfast vegetables, but breakfast protein, eggnog's there for you. Param, I love eggnog. I spent a lot of time.
I'm glad you love this thing. I just have never had it. You have some with you. You brought a prop.
Yes. I've been looking forward to answering this question above all other questions we received.
All right.
Now, Dungeon Novice suggests I put the eggnog in the cereal instead of milk. I actually don't put a lot of milk into my cereal, and I feel like it would just become kind of a goo if I used eggnog instead of milk. So I understand why you would assume that. That's not the direction I go. Side of eggnog. So Oilent Green wants to know when we were going to do the spin-off for the Nogcast. I think we just did. I don't know how much more eggnog content I could fill a podcast with.
Yeah, I can't be enthusiastic about something I've never tasted, so I can't participate in the Nogcast.
Wait a second. Dungeon Novice says that is not at all what I said. What? Are you talking to me? All right. I'm sorry if I misunderstood something, Dungeon Novice.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Dungeon Novice, next question, Ryan.
That actually should have been your question. My mistake. What books would you like to see for the first? What books would you like to see for first edition that they won't be releasing?
Oh, I got an answer for this.
I think most people can guess because we flat out said to Eric Mona, "You mean this book isn't coming out?" Is that the one you were thinking of?
I don't know. I don't know what we told Eric that we did.
NPC Codex 2. That's the one we were like, really? There's not going to be an NPC Codex 2?
Yeah, it is sad that we never got the NPC Codex 2 because more of that book would have been awesome. But no, the book I want is Ultimate War. I want a military campaign style book that revisits mass combat, makes naval combat based off of Starfinder's starship combat, just like makes so you can have military style campaigns. It's such a huge part of fantasy, and the game supports it so poorly right now.
Another book, and I only came up with this in thinking about this question, so we haven't talked about this before, but the Advanced Game Master's Guide, especially something that takes into consideration how technology has changed and most of the onus for that new technology is on the Game Master. So using Roll20, using Sirenscape, using all of the new gadgets that are available to you. The game was not written with those in mind, but a book could easily be written telling you how to implement those, how to use social media to your advantage, how much tech leans towards more of a sci-fi game, so how much tech to allow in your game without breaking verisimilitude, or how to use tech in a way that enhances verisimilitude. Maybe it would just be the technological GM's guide now that I think about it.
I think a book like that would be extremely useful to the community, and I don't know that I would want anybody... How do I put this very nicely?
I don't know.
Paizo is very traditional in their publishing formats and use of technology, and outsources most of the stuff that is more complicated or more involved with some fantastic partners. I would love to see a book by Benjamin Looms and BJ Hensley and Archive of Nethys and all those people get together and make that book, because I think that those
the Roll20 people could get in on that.
BJ Hensley's Hero Lab.
Oh yeah, BJ. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And sure, somebody from Roll20, just get the people that are in those spaces together, and Paizo pay them to write that book, and it would be awesome. But Paizo does traditional publishing very well, and they do the PDF support very well, and they've embraced the use of technology, but I would want to see the technological experts in the community head that book up.
Some of the highlights from chat in response to this question. Darren Kaldemeyer wants another campaign setting hardcover.
But where would it be?
Where wouldn't it be? Would it be a location? Most of the campaign setting hardcovers were thematic. There, the races. There was the gods.
There just weren't a lot of campaign setting hardcovers, so it's kind of hard to see where that would go. Because there were
Dungeon Novice. Oh, sorry.
So there was, yeah, never mind. Move on.
Dungeon Novice suggests a spell book, feats, traits, or bestiary compilation.
Those would be very easy books to put together and super useful at the end of a game's lifetime, but they wouldn't be in the spirit of continuing the game.
Kaldemeyer. Go ahead.
Oh heck, we as much as we loved Ultimate Equipment, we were critical of it right off the bat that it was going to be misnamed the very month it was released.
Darren Kaldemeyer is talking about Ultimate Commoner, favorite of the podcast.
Oh yeah, I would totally. Please to goodness, Paizo, let James Jacobs write that book.
And finally, Dungeon Novice suggests Goblins of Purity. No?
Maybe a soft cover.
Very thin one.
Free RPG Day.
Yes. Yeah, all right. I'm on board.
But it has to be a flip one with Skittermanders of Chaos.
Ooh. What's next, Baron?
Up next, we have a question that came in from Discord from King of Rock. Do you think the Whispering Tyrant's return in PF2 and the Test of the Starstone being considered for an Adventure Path or AP that the Mythic rule set might be getting a do-over? I hadn't really put much thought into Mythic because it was one of those rules that has a very has a fan base that's a subset of the base that loves it, and everybody else kind of moved on or didn't have a good experience with it. I know that Legendary Games has done fantastic work, like expanding and doing some corrections with that system. If you're interested, go check out their third-party offerings for first edition. I think that eventually they're going to have to consider the high-level question again, and I'm sure that they would love a second time at bat at it.
But Mythic wasn't high level. It was low level, high level.
Right. So they're going to need to address the high-level content, and they need a second time at bat. Sorry, I guess it's a little bit of damning with slight praise there.
It's because that's the problem with Mythic. It was always a concept that was hard to wrap your head around because it came out, and one of the messages they had to get across was this is not Epic. And that's fine. That's something that you had to teach the audience because Epic was one of those books from 3.0 that was open content, and they could have adapted straight away if they wanted, and they didn't want to. Paizo repeatedly said they didn't want to, but then Mythic came out and they had to reiterate, Mythic is not Epic. And then it's like, what is Mythic? Well, it lets you punch a T-Rex. Great. I can already punch a T-Rex. It's like, but it lets you do it earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. So what? And then the one adventure path that was tied to it is one of the ones that's most notoriously hard to run, and that the rules outpace themselves in complexity, and eventually the whole adventure path just becomes a wash. I don't know anyone, I should say, that has finished the Wrath of the Righteous. It's just, Mythic was kind of a failed experiment, and it's something that, more than anything, Paizo has just walked away from. Like, even Words of Power gets talked about more positively than Mythic does.
I mean, Words of Power wasn't a problem. It was because Words of Power wasn't supported in PFS, it just didn't get latched onto by the community. So it never got any development.
Yeah, but Mythic is a concept that caused confusion, a rule set that didn't work. There is just, other than what Legendary Games did to resuscitate what they understood the concept to be and to find potential in it, it was just not something that it's a low point of first edition, really.
And I think it's telling that whenever we see Mythic used today in more modern books, it's always high level content. It's never Mythic tacked onto low level monsters.
Yeah, that was the one bestiary that came out. I think it was Bestiary 5. Had a lot of low level Mythic, Mythic stuff. But other than that, no. Oilant Green in chat is saying that they recently moved on to book 3 of Wrath of the Righteous, which
that's where it falls apart.
Surprised and encouraging. Oh, is that where it falls apart? I thought it was
falls
right
apart. Good luck, Oilant Green. Hope you have fun with it. Do look into Legendary Games offerings. You want to do that. You will want better support for it than just the book, and I hope your group has fun with it. But that's where it fell apart for me and most of the groups that I talked to. It falls apart in book 3. And that's so sad because book 1 is such a strong book. The first adventure is so good.
Next question.
Aziz via Discord. When are you guys going to do a first edition retrospective? Gosh, I don't know.
January 2018.
January
We started the year with the odd choice of doing mini reviews of the entire hardcover line, and shortly thereafter, second edition was announced. So really, the only thing that wasn't covered in that book was, in that episode was Planar Adventures.
Yeah, looking back,
was
that
then
looks
covered a couple of episodes later.
Yeah, looking back, that episode seems awful suspect. But really, we had no official notification of it when we filmed that one.
I think that was another episode where I was going to be like, let's do a year in review. And then, like, the day of, I was like, hey, did you just want to do mini reviews of all the hardcovers? And you were like, yes.
It's such a good episode. Go read, like, that is a great episode. Go check it out. Not right now. Please finish this episode. But when you're done, if you want to, go check it out. It's a fun episode.
Does relate to Dungeon Novice's next question. What was your favorite episode this year?
Gosh, I don't know.
I would say it's the Eric Mona Logan Bonner.
Yeah, hands down, you're right. That was such a fantastic bit of content. It just ran away. It went long just because everybody involved, including the guests, just wanted to keep going. Yeah.
Chat was super active, and they were the guests were super supportive of all of chat questions. We were going all over the place with things because there was more questions than there was content. So it's not like people could have gotten this information elsewhere. Even on the Paizo blog, even with that successful rollout, there was only so much concrete information we got. And so having that chance to talk to them being so candid, yeah, it was fun. There was an amazing energy.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what, same thing?
I don't think there's anything more to say. I mean, I think that every hardcover reviewed episode is second place, but that's first place by a long margin. Ted Master via Discord. So I've decided to DM a quick one-shot game next week. What should I do to prepare myself? Oh my gosh, that is not a question I expected.
Also, Ted Meister is playing 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons. He came in, or they came in last week, or maybe or even just this week. Introduced themselves as a 3.5 loyalist who came across our site, and it was kind of refreshing to have a conversation about 3.5. It hasn't been like deeply crunchy or anything, but it was just nice to have like a reminder of the site's roots.
I say that if you're going, regardless of if you're going to run a pre-written adventure or not, if you are wanting to do a one-shot, get a hold of an organized play or a very short, well-reviewed adventure to look at what, and like, I'm assuming that because you're asking this question, you're new to running games. So it's just to see an example of like what sorts of things you need to consider when prepping an adventure, what the challenges looks like, what they expect running the game looks like. Regardless of if you're going to run the pre-written adventure or not, looking at a well-made one-shot adventure and its scope will give you a good idea of how to prepare yourself.
I'd also suggest consider the 5 W's and especially the why. When you are learning the plot, don't just care about what happens in what order, because that is what GMs will, that is where the idea that GMs lose control of an adventure because players are doing things. But players are reacting to what they have been told based on what their understanding and motivation to be, based on the clear direction they get by asking those same questions. And so always knowing why things are happening is more important than knowing what is happening and when it's happening.
Because it's going to go off the rails. And you need to know how to adapt it.
If you think of those as rails, I think of it as a breathing organism that they are just an invasive species in. Luis, the network's very own Luis says via Discord, had you a chance to get one last class into first edition Pathfinder, what would it be? What about a subsystem? I have a more serious answer and a less serious answer to this one. Where should I begin?
I don't know. Go.
As hard as for the one last class, I would have liked the weapon expert, which is kind of what the swashbuckler and the gunslinger were. They feel like they should have been archetypes for a weapon expert, just someone who takes it and, equipment feats, or the equipment trick feat, I should say. I would like that for a wide variety of weapons, and that this is just a class that you give him the one thing. You give him a bow, and he can use it as a staff, and he can use it as a climbing baton, a climbing winch. They could use the one weapon in ways far beyond what they were ever expected. It's what separates Hawkeye. He's not an archer. He's a weapon expert with the bow, because he's not just good. Excuse me. He's not just good at archery. He's good with a bow. And a subsystem would have been just to turn this into a gigantic class where equipment tricks are applied to weapons, and they are just the best at that. The less serious answer would have been the, I think I've talked about it on the podcast at one point, the sports star. So basically the Refrigerator Perry, but as a fantasy character, similar to how just G.I. Joe had the Fridge and Sergeant Slaughter and almost had Rocky Balboa. So the subsystem would be a whole bunch of sports of Galarian, and the class would be cross-sport athlete.
I want a master artisan as a class.
Ooh,
like I want to be able to play the character of, I'm going to craft something awesome. We're going to fortify this town, and I'm your man. We're going to solve this with the human ingenuity and to be as well developed as any other class. It maybe even having in combat options on how to apply it, as opposed to just like the NPC classes that kind of bear the burden of this in the system. But this could be like the engineer or the super advanced blacksmith, or just like the person who organizes the defense of a city. I want to flesh out the let's use options other than violence to solve our problems, the class, with all the support that every other class gets.
Derek Aldmeyer says, good news, it'll be an ultimate.
Yes. If it's an ultimate peasant, we're good. And for a subsystem, good lordy, I have no idea. I think that like right at the end, all my wish lists for subsystems, besides the war system I mentioned earlier, were kind of answered. So I don't know on that one.
Couple of comments from chat. So Dungeon Novice is suggesting I want DC's Sportsmaster. I'm not familiar with that character. I'm familiar with Marvel's NFL Super Pro. He would fall under that category. So would pro wrestlers like Bob Sparkplug Holly or Abe Knuckle Schwartz or the Goon, where they are doing one thing, but they are apparently members of another sport entirely. There's a surprising amount of reference that I can pull for this weird sports superstar cross class.
Okay.
Before we move on to the last question, I want chat to know this is our last question, and episode's getting a little bit late. We've got a few shoutouts that we want to get to, but if people have any last questions that they'd like us added to the bill, we have a few more minutes that we can cover that kind of stuff.
I've got one question that came in via Facebook. Did you see that one? Did we skip that one?
I thought I had it on the list. I know the one you're talking about, but no, I don't see it.
I see it on the list now. You highlighted it yellow. Did we skip it?
Whoops. That's I must have done that by mistake. All right, so we'll get to that one, and then we'll get to the last one. Or do you want to save this one for last?
Let's save it for last, because
Creepin' Coffin's question in Discord is actually similar to the one Luis asked, and that is if you had to see more hybrid classes, what would they be?
Oh, good question.
So I designed the hybrid class that tied into a Gnome Need, which was the Monk Magus, and the idea that you are punching your spells. That seemed like a niche that I was surprised was never covered by a Magus archetype. Since that book came out, there have been a couple of Magus archetypes that specialize in unarmed combat. Not in quite the same way as my class did, but enough that I don't think that needs to be a hybrid class on its own anymore. I mean, still buy the book if you're curious, but there was also the Luchador was a hybrid class of the Vigilante and something. Oh, Vigilante and Brawler, I think. And that was something that came out for third party. Like, it was a third-party publisher. I forget which offhand, but that was a good use of the hybrid class rules. And hybrid class is actually getting their own book that's basically as long as a Pathfinder companion. I think that that's a really effective way of looking at hybrid classes, because it's like the idea of hybrid class can be so good if you are taking two classes that are a little bit off, but they do have one thing that connects them, one thing that synergizes them, and then you just exploit that synergy in a way that the existing feats that apply to those classes don't necessarily work. Ooh, Darren Caldemeyer says medium and paladin.
Ooh. Because they know if you've been bad or good. So it'd be good, for goodness sake.
But don't the good guys already know who's good and bad?
But now they know why you're bad.
Oh, there we go. Oh, but then you might question just how bad you truly are.
Yeah. But to think about it, they make the ultimate reformers. Because they could see exactly what was causing your bad tendencies and help you work around it.
Actually, this reminds me, this is more of an answer to Luis's question, but I was always intrigued by the Chronomancer as a concept. This is something that dates back to at least 2nd edition as far as I know. And it never got a 3rd edition treatment. It never got Pathfinder treatment, although the Time Thief and the Time Warden from Rogue Genius Games are both in that area, but a lot more, and actually a subsystem on time travel and time. And you know what? A hardcover book that we could use, time travel. A subsystem we can use, time travel. A new class we can use, Chronomancer. That is my retroactive answer to a whole bunch of these questions.
Time travel is just so messy.
That's why it needs its own source book and subsystem and class.
So my answer for hybrid class is I want a bard druid that focuses on making animal friends and buffing them. And
oh, I was thinking more of a geomancer. You talk to the plants.
No. Talk with the animals. You are Disney Princess the class.
I thought you were going to say Dr. Dolittle with the talk to the animals line. I'm so close to what you're about to say, Param. 2 or 3 times in a row now.
No, because then you
but
can
like between Disney princesses, Dr. Dolittle, geomancers, like there's obviously something there.
Yeah, you got it, and like it's all about your animal friends and enhancing and working with your animal friends, and maybe some minor spell casting, because both those classes have spell casting, but more focused on I am the pet class. I guess this has this is different from I guess it has a lot of common with my Starfinder one, but I really am thinking about like just this is what like a dryad would be.
Okay. Well, it's also like wild empathy is something druids already get, and it feels like you would be the diplomancer of wild empathy.
Yep.
Darren Caldemeyer's, he seems shocked that you're suggesting the Disney animals were under the fascination bard song all. They were also awakened.
Yeah. You sing and awaken the forest.
That is a cool class. I would like to see that. That's a great concept.
Woohoo! We need to get busy. We've only got so long to get a third-party product out for Pathfinder 1st Edition.
We have forever. The open game license is valid in perpetuity.
Bard Wannabe does say there is the animal speaker bard archetype, so I guess it's there, you can get halfway there.
I think that just scratches the surface of what you're talking about.
Yeah. It'd be like
Finally.
Packmaster. Like, I don't want one bear. I want, like, I guess an archetype could have one bear, but you would just have, like, birds and bunnies and foxes and, yeah, just like a whole herd. You would have a swarm. You would tame a swarm of woodland critters.
Swarm tamer. So finally, that question we almost skipped, so I'm glad you you had it in mind. Carlos Cabrera via facebook.com/no direction. Paizo made its mark by supporting an unsupported rule system people love. Why worry about splitting your fan base by leaving your own rules unsupported when half of your world was still left undesigned?
Ooh, I think that this is 2 separate issues.
Go on.
The half the world left undesigned part is a separate concept than the fan base splitting part.
I agree.
Yeah, because there's nothing the world is not tied to a rule system, and I think that attempts to marry rule system and worlds together too tightly is kind of what have hurt previous editions of related games, which we just talked about, like what happened to the Forgotten Realms when they wanted to reset so hard that they basically killed what a lot of people loved about it. So the world will continue to evolve and be grown, and there's lots of places that they can fill that out. So I think that from that point of view, this that's going to still continue to happen. Now, was there enough world left to continue to make first edition product? Maybe. I think that there probably was room for, like, if they really wanted to, like if they really wanted to double down on first edition, I think there was still room for a few more years of first edition if they really wanted to explore all the possible aspects and maybe take a nice change of tactic. But I do think that me and you were ready for a new edition. It felt like it was about the right time for something to happen. Now, whether or not we're on board with what comes, that's still up in the air, but it wasn't... The Pathfinder had gotten to explore itself, gotten to grow itself, got to explore its limits, and we're dealing with a 20-year-old system now that we have learned a lot of its pain points over the years that do need to be refined if this is going to continue to be a healthy game that attracts new players for another 10 years.
There's a couple of key word choices here that I think really they show a difference between how Carlos is thinking about the rule system and how Paizo has to think about it as the publisher. The one, he's saying that you're leaving your own rules. They're not, because their rules are whatever rule publishing, and second edition is more Paizo's own rules than first edition is, because first edition is a legacy of 0.5 Dungeons and Dragons. Is why you said it's a 20-year system instead of a 10-year system. And second, why change rules when half your world is still left undesigned? Those are unrelated things. Pathfinder campaign setting existed before Pathfinder rule set, and it will continue to exist long after. There is no reason to think that Golarion can only be played with Pathfinder First Edition, because it already has been played with just a single system. It's been played with 2 different playtest editions and First Edition.
Right. And like I said, I played 4th edition in it for a year, and there are bunches of people that play 5th edition games using Paizo's APs, because Paizo's adventure paths are so good that it's worth the effort to do the conversion.
Andrew Marlowe has had a couple of blog articles in a row now. I think he's on part 3 of his series talking about using Golarion with other systems, and he is going far out with some of the systems he's using. It's not just other fantasies.
Like he's mentioned Cypher system, which is like super streamlined, and
I believe Gumshoe was one of the ones he covered.
I love Gumshoe. Gumshoe's a system that is so... It's one of the systems that kind of changed my way of thinking about challenges. And something just collapsed behind me. I hope it wasn't anything important. What's the system that you play with the Jenga blocks? Dread, yeah. A Dread version of Strange Eons, maybe?
In fact, I remember when first edition started getting published. First edition came out, the core rulebook came out, and suddenly the campaign setting books had Pathfinder first edition content in it. And I just found that was strange and kind of annoying as someone who didn't want anything to do with the campaign setting, but wanted those rules.
Mm-hmm.
So, there was a time when the system, the campaign setting, was system neutral. And we don't know if that's going to continue to be, but there's enough system neutral content in any given campaign setting book that you can just read it for the system, for the campaign setting itself.
I think you got that a little bit backwards. The rule system was campaign setting neutral, or mostly campaign setting neutral. But
the campaign setting was system neutral, more or less. Like the original Monsters Revisited had maybe it had 1 page per chapter of Crunch, and it was just a reprint from the bestiary. Like, there was almost no system content until first edition came out, and then they became system books, where the campaign setting was the new campaign content was being supported by rules specific. But early on, like even the original Gods and Magic book had very little Crunch content for what is effectively Crunch content.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. They have definitely upped the amount of crunch in campaign setting books as Pathfinder has become more established.
So, Carlos, a lot of your question was about splitting the fan base, and it's just a matter of, do they continue to publish something that continues to have growing pains, continues to have problems that it had originally, and refuses to get refuses to adapt to the changing and evolving game space that it publishes into? No, Paizo absolutely has to do these changes to stay relevant and to continue to be a profitable company. They were the top. Sorry, go ahead.
They have to do changes. We don't know what those changes should be.
These, as in the creating a new rules.
Oh yeah.
All right, chat did not provide us with any last questions. We got all the questions that I know about. I think we're ready to wrap things up.
Yeah, okay. Right after this.
Right after this.
And we're back.
Thank you for joining us for episode 190 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News Reviews and Interview podcast. Before we go, we want to shout out to a couple of things. First of all, eggnog. Not a great beverage to drink while you have to do a lot of talking. It's very sticky.
Yeah, you're not supposed to drink viscous stuff when you're going to be doing long vocal performances.
No, that's why I usually stick to a nice tea. But I'm long past my tea and my water, and I wet my whistle with basically thick yolk. Darren Caldemeyer in chat wants us to know that it's 156 days until PaizoCon. Thank you, Darren, the official No Direction PaizoCon countdown correspondent.
Gosh, that's a lot sooner. I guess it is very early this year.
March or May? One of the M months.
I think it's
some
May.
American holiday. Veterans Day? Is that it? Is that even a thing?
It's a thing. I don't know if it... Like, I don't have those notes up.
Darren says May. Thank you, Darren.
It's in May. I knew it was in May. Memorial Day.
It was close. We might have Memorial Day in Canada, honestly. But, yeah, before we go, a couple of... I want to take some time to thank the people who have made the network what it is. We were talking earlier about what it means to us and just how much we've grown. So I want to give some shout out to some of the key players in the network, both past and present, starting with Kathy. As we mentioned in the last episode, Kathy is she never gets the credit she deserves. She has been with the network longer than everyone except for you and I. She has played key roles on multiple podcasts. And the only reason we don't get more Geek Together is because of me, because my life got busy, and she is dying to record some new episodes. There's several episodes that she has expressed an interest in, and I said, I would love to. Let's figure out when, and we have yet to figure out when. So there would be more Kathy content if it wasn't for me. There is more Kathy content on Adventurous, which I am very happy with. And there is so much Kathy content in the archives on the website. So big shout out to Kathy for being the ever-present and ever-patient co-host that she is. Next up, we've got Alex. Alex, his role on the network has expanded quite a bit, especially with Beyond, where he is... I was going to say he's in the Param role on that, but no, that's not really true. Beyond has its own dynamic that I can't directly compare to No Direction Prime, the main No Direction show. But Alex definitely stepped up. No Direction Beyond has come out with the consistent schedule that I basically wanted it to be. Otherwise, I would have been unhappy. And I'm glad that you three have been able to more or less, 2 out of 3 or all 3 of you have been able to do it every week or every other week. You're churning out a lot of content. Alex continues to be one of the most, he puts out a lot of content. What is the word I'm looking for?
Which kind of content? He's one of the most prominent.
His own third-party content.
Yeah, he's probably
prolific.
Yes,
prolific is the word I was looking for. One of the most prolific third-party publishers of Pathfinder and Starfinder material that's out there. And if you have not checked out what's available from Everyman Gaming in a while, it's always worth checking it out every couple of months, because he puts out both major releases that are some of the cornerstones of those games from third-party material for those games from third-party publishers, but he also puts out a lot of little products now and then. He put out a Kangaroo Man for Pathfinder that I downloaded just because I kangaroos.
He's put out 3 Kangaroo Man books.
He's put out 2 more. Wow. All right. So that's what I'm saying. It's always worth checking out Everyman Gaming just to see what, just one, to marvel at the amount of content he churns out, and to see what is out there that might be the perfect thing for your game.
Yeah.
And Bard Wannabe figured out I wanted to say prolific in chat. Thank you, Bard Wannabe.
I do want to shout out one of his newer releases is a line called the Pop Culture Catalog for Starfinder. It's kind of like what we wanted James Jacobs to write as like an almanac for Golarion. It's what he's doing. He's basically exploring like what would everyday culture be like in Starfinder's future, and it's been a really fun series of books to read, and it's got some great art where it's not all action. It's just like adventurers kicking back and having fun, and you know, the B plots. It's the source book for your B plots.
That's good, because with Pathfinder you could just say, well, what did they do in medieval Europe? And you know, you can have one of those, what do they call it when they beat up a bear as a spectacle?
I don't know. We shouldn't be beating up bears.
No, we've come a long way since medieval Europe. But anyway, you can always just throw things from actual world, Earth history, and you like, there's already a shared history for a fantasy setting that we do not have for a sci-fi setting. And so having a book like that, so everyone can read it and everyone kind of has a similar touchstone of like, these are the things we grew up on, these are the things everyone has a basic understanding of, that gives a context to the campaign and to the world that is missing in a sci-fi setting. Sci-fi settings have to build their own, or they have to be like Star Trek and pretend bear baiting. Thank you, Oiland Green. Yeah, or it could be like Star Trek and they just pretend that everyone in the future is only going to be talking.
Well,
even if you're Klingon.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's just, yeah. Star Trek only got like that with Next Generation and on. There was original series was much more bear baiting friendly.
All right. Next up, Andrew Marlowe. Andrew has some of the most intriguing blogs, and I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for just how in-depth he goes in a lot of his blog content. Not to mention that the Marlowe House is now putting out a lot of Twitch-based actual play content. It's not Pathfinder, which is kind of the strength of it. They are exploring different systems, and they are doing one-shots that try and show the strength and diversity of the systems that they're playing in.
It reminds me of like Friends at the Table, which was an actual play podcast I liked before. And this is meant to be a compliment, gang. So because they're exploring these smaller systems with interesting storylines and small casts, it is a flavor that you don't see in like the 18 millionth D&D 5th edition actual play podcast out there.
James's blog is probably the most educational blog we have on the network. It is something that I've constantly learned new science and new sociology lessons from. I look forward to when his blog comes out, because more than anyone else, I have no idea what to expect from, like, there is no typical Code Switch blog. So when a new Code Switch comes out, it is a shock. It is a surprise to look forward to.
Yeah.
And James, it's fun to listen to him on Beyond, because that is his only podcast presence. He's barely been on. Has he ever been on No Direction Prime as a guest?
I don't think so.
Wow.
I do want to. James is an incredibly busy person, and so I'm very lucky that he's making the time to make regular appearances on Beyond. We would love to have him on more of the network. Me hanging out with James at Gen Con convinced me that Beyond was what we needed to do. I was going to do it, but he sort of sealed the deal, and so he having him on Beyond it was one of the reasons that show happened.
And it's also one of the things that gives Beyond a unique voice, like literally and figuratively, because I mean, you're on most of what the network puts out. Alex has made more appearances on No Direction than any other guest co-host. So having James being someone that is specific to No Direction Beyond adds a personality, adds something you can look forward to beyond just the content, but the dynamic of that show. Then we've got Lauren.
Oh, Lauren's awesome.
Lauren's just amazing, right?
She's pure charm and intellect in one package.
And she has some confidence issues, and she's come to me every now and then with them, and is surprised when people appreciate her work and whatnot. And so I've complimented Lauren quite a bit, and usually whenever I compliment her, I try and come up with something new to compliment, like some new angle for the compliment. And I'm always coming up with more reasons that I love Lauren. She is amazing and talented and enthusiastic and reliable and fun, and yeah.
And she's got so many unique views on the things we talk about that would have never come up with any other person that we have these chats with.
Next up, we've got Luis. I gushed over Luis last episode, so if you just want to know why, listen to the last episode. But his design philosophy, his laid-back attitude, his love for professional wrestling, these are all things that really connect me with Luis on a different level than I do with anyone else that works at Paizo. And I've been talking to people at Paizo for over a decade. And yet Luis I've only known for a couple of years, and him being a member of the network helped in this regard, but he's just someone that I feel extremely comfortable with. And his blog articles have given his blog articles are the most Redditable because he tends to stick to very pop culture and a younger pop culture than I am tapped into. And so he post the things that people of a younger audience are interested in and get spread out in a way that expands our and is extremely valuable to us as a network and entertaining to us as just fans of it.
The marketeer in me just loves the social reach that Luis articles get.
And Vanessa. So Vanessa joined the network this year, correct?
Is she our absolute newest member?
She and Randall came on about the same time, and I believe both of them were after PaizoCon, but before. And Vanessa very early on carved her niche. Like she is one of the people that was most established when they joined the network. Alex is probably the person that compares to that, although you as well with the Param Spellbook was absolutely a cornerstone of the Paizo the Pathfinder community when you came on. So she's similar in that she's written specials and she's written Pathfinder Society scenarios. And not just that she has these excellent credits, but she has an excellent philosophy. And the more that she dives into her craft, the more fascinated I am, the more I want to, like, reading her blog makes me want to, and that is something I love. That is a reaction I love to have when I'm reading something. That input creates a desire to output for me. And finally, we have Randall. Randall is extremely enthusiastic and extremely he fit right in as soon as he joined the network. He was somebody that was a fan of ours, that he came to us with the idea of joining the network. And unlike Vanessa, we didn't really know his background. We didn't really know much about him. And so it was just kind of like this slow burn of like, what Randall guy seems all right. How are we going to do it? And just every incremental move towards him eventually joining the network was just getting to know this guy, meeting him at Gen Con this face-to-face for the first time this year, just showed his enthusiasm for the brand, his enthusiasm for the network, and his willingness to constantly put out more material. He is one of our weekly bloggers, which we do not have too many of, and his content is always appreciated, and it's from campaign setting point of view, which no one else is doing. And he does one for Pathfinder and one for Starfinder, which makes his some of the only consistent Starfinder content we're putting out.
And it's gotten better significantly every week that he puts out new content. It's better than the week before it.
And a couple of shout outs to some past members. Anthony and Monica are no longer active network members, although Monica recently got in touch hoping to do a guest blog, which is more like just a one-off or an occasional revival of Inspire Confidence, which was, it's a blog I miss. It is something that we do not have that content or enough of that content anymore. We do not. The social awareness and so the social awareness that I believe was the philosophy of the network was never stated as explicitly as it was when Monica was a member and was actively writing a blog.
Especially, it means so much to the network.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely something we all feel, and we try to bring up as often as possible, and we try and share the news of just like sorry, I'm running out of steam. Whenever like we make a point to make sure that we record socially relevant content from conventions that we attend. You've been sharing what you didn't hear personally, but you found recordings from the PAX seminars that you were looking forward to or that you regretted missing. But not having a blog that's us of these issues and going into like really exploring them, that's something I miss. And I also miss having Monica around. She's a good time. And likewise, I really miss Anthony, because I feel like since he left the blog and he left the network, mostly because his life he got a new house, a new kid, he got married. No, he may have already. But
and his fandom changed. He became super into the Warhammer scene.
What's that?
His fandom changed. He morphed into more of a Warhammer player.
That's true, and that's fine. But what I was trying to get at is that Anthony reached the nesting phase. He left the network, and I'm barely in touch with him. Monica, I still chat with from time to time, but Anthony was somebody that was he was a major player on the network. He took over hosting duties or co-hosting duties for Sanctuary. He had a regular blog, which was our only jamming blog for a long time. He was the one who put together our Slack channel, and when he left the network, I lost almost all touch with him, and that disappoints me. A honorary member, I'm not too sure exactly how to approach this. Something we haven't brought. We have an Instagram account related to the network that is not run by the network. It is a fan-generated No Direction Instagram account run by Timothy Drake Hagar. He approached Param and I asking if he could do it. We just kind of got an idea of what he wanted to do with it, and it's basically sharing the kind of things we share to Facebook every day, like with redirects to the blogs, only doing it on Instagram, which I have an Instagram account, but it's hardly my social media platform of choice. So having somebody that is comfortable doing that and has been pointing out this content regularly, it really helps the network. And we'll probably have to have conversations about whether we should at some point make this an official network blog or not, or an official
social channel
officially under the network umbrella. Yeah, like it's not currently linked to by the website. It's never been mentioned. Oh, there we go. Timothy is Dungeon Novice. I didn't even realize. So he's in chat right now and says, "Hey, that's me." Well, thank you, Timothy, for all your hard work. And sorry that we didn't take the time to bring people's attention to the Instagram before now, but we're doing it now. Crystal and Ari, I'm just going to give a hello, guys, and thanks for all your hard work on the network. If you don't know Crystal and Ari, if you don't follow them on social, they are delights. They're both intelligent, informative, and outspoken, and well worth your Twitter follow and your Facebook. I don't know if you could send them a friendship request, but I believe Crystal has an offer.
Is there someone we should mention that we haven't mentioned yet?
You? Thank you, Param.
No, who we haven't announced yet. Should we announce that now?
That's up to you.
I think we should announce that now, since
Seems like a good time.
Yeah. So also joining us as a cast member to replace the empty slot that Ari has left behind and wanting. We love Ari participating, and we understand why she had to leave, and it'll be big shoes to fill. But to attempt to fill those shoes is another incredibly frequent guest on both No Direction Beyond and No Direction. Jason Keeley will be joining us going forward in Adventurous from now on. He will be.
That's exciting and apropos, because Jason Keeley is basically the reason that we got Crystal on the podcast.
Oh boy, yeah. I still feel bad about how that went down.
Well, we don't have to anymore.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, Jason Keeley will be joining us with book 2, which we'll be recording the next episode in the near future.
Yep.
Actually, the next episode of Adventurous is not going to be the continuation of War for the Crown. It is going to be a special where one of us, we haven't even decided who's going to be the GM or what characters are going to be playing, but there is a Pathfinder Society scenario that takes place at the same time in the same location as War for the Crown. When we got swept away into the escape room of death, Pathfinder Society cleaned up after the assassination, and that's actually a scenario that can be played. And so, because we can't schedule the next episode in time to keep our weekly schedule, we are going to be running that scenario for our next session, which will be a couple of episodes interlude. Then we'll come back. We'll do one more episode before Jason's character joins our group, and Jason's character will join our group in the second second episode recording within that session, which should be the start of book 2 of War for the Crown.
Yeah, we record these episodes in batches. So if you join us for a live recording of Adventurous, you'll usually, and you get that in the beginning, it's usually 3 to 5 episodes recorded all at one go, and then they're edited and released weekly on the audio stream.
I might see if Jason is available for a one-on-one behind the campsite. Did I say behind the campsite? Yeah, just to talk about how he'll be joining the network and see what he wants to go into about his character, and just chat it up with him. Yeah. More content.
Yeah. And I have run that adventure that you're talking about. It's very fun.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, I will keep that in mind when we decide who's going to GM and who's going to play. Anything else to shout out to, Param?
We need to thank our Patreon backers.
Absolutely, we do. Thank you for all of our Patreon backers. If you go to patreon.com/no-direction, then you can chuck in a buck, as they say. Give us a couple of dollars to help cover our bills, help us continue to expand our content every month. And didn't really come up earlier, but I think that one thing we realized this year is that we are kind of in the same situation Paizo was in when they were licensing Dragon and Dungeon Magazine Ghost, and suddenly that license was on. They've got a lot of eggs in one basket. We've got all our eggs in the Paizo basket between Pathfinder and Starfinder. And so in the near future, expect our content to diversify a little bit. I still want to be... No Direction is still going to be the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. Beyond is still going to be Starfinder. But it's going to occasionally drift into other systems, with the angle always being how does this apply to a Pathfinder player. And then the no Direction content on the network is going to expand. I would love to say that Geek Together is going to come back with some regularity, but every time I say that, I get a couple of episodes in, and then life happens. But Geek Together is not gone. It is not even on hiatus. It is just now an infrequent release schedule, in that it doesn't have a schedule.
Right.
But yeah, the more that you can support us, the more we are able to keep our equipment up to date. We are able to stream. We are able to interact with our fans more. And hopefully someday we'll be able to have all of the content we can imagine out to you, our loyal and interactive audience.
They're enthusiastic supporters.
Enthusiastic, yes. So, Param, 2018's been a year.
It has been. It's been one of the longest years.
Oh, interesting. It's definitely had its peaks and valleys as far experiences for both of us. But it's also the year we got to see each other twice.
Yeah, my first PaizoCon. Oh my gosh, we didn't even mention it. It was so awesome. Dungeon Novice points out Black Panther came out this year. Holy goodness, that is a true statement. That doesn't just
feel like a long time ago. It feels like a lot of Marvel.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's hope that next year is fantastic.
Well, until next year, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And you are always welcome in... No, what?
Sure, do it one last time.
You're always welcome in our private sanctuary, and if you want to find the path, you need to know.
Bye, everybody.